Number 10. Dr. Manhattan. Dr. Manhattan is not very good at people. Case in point when he altered Superman's family history by rescuing Jor-El from planet Krypton, just as it was exploding apart. Dr. Manhattan ended up doing this in an attempt to better understand Superman's seemingly natural sense of goodness. However, rescuing Jor-El at this crucial moment and then setting him up to have him watch and observe his son's life only made Jor-El go insane, especially as he'd already been resigned to die alongside his family left on Krypton. Jor-El living didn't give us the happiest of endings as he became the mysterious, complicated, sometimes heroic, sometimes villainous Mr. Oz. And while this might not seem so disastrous to us, the readers, I'm sure from Jor-El's perspective, learning about all of the cruelty of humankind throughout the years was pretty shocking and heartbreaking. Number 9. Cable. Cable messed up his past by killing his own future. Yep, he messed up not just the past, but his own past and his future. He just messed it all up. But also he kinda weirdly neatly ended up closing off his time loop at the same time. Does that make sense? Basically, when old Cable died, it was at the hands of his younger self, young Cable, who had come to end his life. Old Cable of course knew that this was coming and inevitable because he was once his younger self who had killed his older self. It sounds more confusing than it is, I think. In killing his older self, young Cable would later reflect and wonder if in doing so, he'd actually made a big mistake. But the cool thing about Cable is that because he's usually a time traveler, he's never really gone. Like Doctor Who, there are many different points in his timeline we haven't yet seen, so he can always still return and pop up still alive, but at a different point in his timeline that we simply haven't seen yet. And there may have even been a simpler way to fix the problem of old Cable's death than most of us probably thought of, but you'll get no spoilers from me on that matter. Check out the Cable series if you want to learn more about this timey-wimey mutant stuff and how it all goes down. But also just check it out because it's an amazing series. And friends, before I move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to learn more about time traveling, futuristic superheroes, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. The Teen Titans. The Teen Titans end up learning the hard way how even trying to help save the future can end up ruining your own future, but in the past. Time travel stuff. It's confusing. In Titans Tomorrow, the Teen Titans accidentally create an alternate timeline when they travel to the 31st century to help the Legion of Superheroes beat the Fatal 500. On their way back to their own timeline, they accidentally end up 10 years into their own futures from whence they left, only to learn that this past and their future has been dramatically changed. The older versions of themselves they meet are villainous and tyrannical in nature, becoming known as one of the factions of the Titans, Titans West. And in this reality, Titans West are the villains of the story in comparison to the opposing faction, Titans East. We're basically like the heroic Titans. But none of the Titans that are the main characters are on that group. They're all evil. Oh no. Number 7. Moira McTaggart. Moira isn't really a time traveling hero, but she still is futuristic in the sense that she has lived through multiple alternate futures. During Dawn of X, we learn that Moira is in fact a mutant whose powers are that of reincarnation, but not as in she dies and just springs back to life. More in the sense that she dies and is reborn, repeating her life again from birth. Because of this, Moira has a lot of experience when it comes to fighting for mutant rights, and she is seen in being a key player in the mutants and humanity's repeated downfall. In fact, it seems as though almost every single one of her lives has had a worse outcome than the one previous to it. Well, except for the one that she's currently living, so far. Moira is currently on her 10th life, which seems to be going much better in comparison. With this life taking place in the 616 reality, it seems as though Moira with the mutants may have actually succeeded in creating a future where they will all get to thrive. However, it should be noted that Moira is in her 10th life, an important one since Destiny once threatened Moira and using her own powers warned Moira that her life would not be quite so infinite as she thought, seeing roughly only 10 lives total for her to live through. Maybe 11 if Moira plays her cards right. So this could be Moira's last one. But how will it end? Number 6. The Flash. There are multiple Flashes that have attempted to mess with time or reality, and as you can expect, it never goes well. Wally West's attempt was no exception, although at least he just barely managed to avoid disastrous results. But this one was a close call with a lot at stake, and so for that reason, I'm gonna count it. This all went down when he, Wally, learned in New 52 of the kids that he'd had in the previous continuity who had been lost. He was willing to race through time in order to save them as fast as he could, but it turned out this was all a manipulation of Hunter Zolomon's. Snap. Wally West almost destroyed the Speed Force and Hypertime in the process, but managed to avoid doing so when he learned that it was all a trick. Although he wouldn't rescue his kids this time around, Wally would later be reunited with them, and they're actually back in the continuity now, where Wally gets to resume a much more happy ending focused version of his own story. Yay! Number 5. Iron Man. While we might know Iron Man as a hero who helped to work out the kinks in time travel to set everything right in the MCU, in the comics there was one major time where he kinda ended up doing just the opposite. Of course, this didn't happen in the main continuity, but in the What If story, what if Iron Man was trapped in the time of King Arthur, from issue 33 of the original What If series. Iron Man had traveled back in time with Doctor Doom before, but in this reality, instead of also returning back to the present day, he gets stuck there when Doom abandons him, traveling back without Iron Man. How rude. Not only is that going to likely be a problem back in the present day, but Tony remaining in the past ultimately results in the death of King Arthur. Without having an heir, Arthur, with his dying breath, passes the throne on to Tony. Sounds like history is going to end up being more than a little wonky as a result of this whole kerfuffle. Number 4. Iron Lad. Iron Lad messed up by becoming Kang, I guess, and then of course going back in time and causing a lot of other problems for people in the past under various different identities that Kang has had throughout time. Iron Lad initially swore to not become Kang when he realized that this was his destiny, but over time he would come to team up with his older future selves. In fact, Kang, future Iron Lad himself, is the one to blame for Kang, it turns out, as in the newest series about the villain, we'll learn about how Kang ends up sort of training Iron Lad to become one of the best conquerors and villains that the Marvel Universe has ever seen. Granted, of course, Iron Lad doesn't really want to become Kang still, but if you can't beat him, join him, you know? Number 3. Legion. Legion messed things up pretty epically for the X-Men and the whole world when he messed with time, and I know what you're thinking. Is Legion really a superhero, Amanda? Usually I would say that David Haller is more complex than that, or tends to lean more villain, I would even admit. But lately in the comics he's definitely been playing the role of hero, with him joining Kurt Wagner, aka Nightcrawler, in an attempt to build a mutant religion to unite all who live on Krakoa and Arakko, which is now technically also terraformed Mars. Over in another alternate reality, Legion ended up traveling back in time in an attempt to take out Magneto, all in all with heroic intentions really. However, Legion accidentally ends up killing Professor Charles Xavier, his father, instead. Xavier dies, which then not only prompts Apocalypse to attack 10 years sooner, creating the Age of Apocalypse reality, but this also causes Legion to disappear. You see, he killed Xavier before David was ever born, meaning that Legion therefore no longer existed. Time travel. Don't do it. Are you thinking about it? Don't do it. Number 2. The Flash. This time around we're talking about Barry Allen's The Flash. The Flash is obviously one of the most well-known heroes to have messed with the timeline and learned from his actions. Whether we're talking comics, animated, or live action, we've seen Barry Allen mess up time in pretty much every medium. Barry goes back in time in an effort to save his mom Nora after he learns that Eobard Thawne, his nemesis, Reverse Flash, was actually the one responsible for her death. Gasp. Barry manages to save her, but quickly learns why you don't travel back in time to do that kind of thing. His choice messes with all of reality, creating a Flashpoint paradox and severely messing up the lives of all of his friends and colleagues in the future. In order to fix the problem he has caused, he must go back in time to fix the past by stopping himself from ever going to save his mom. And he wasn't even really able to fix the problem quite so simply. He messed things up so bad that even in setting things straight, he actually shook up the entire DC universe, ultimately resetting the continuity and creating New 52. Number 1. Booster Gold. Booster Gold has ruined the past a few times before in the comics, though I think one of the craziest mess-ups I've ever seen is when he tried to do something nice for Bruce in honor of his impending marriage to Catwoman as a wedding present. Oh, how nice. Booster Gold planned to travel back in time and save Batman's parents on that fateful night so that they could attend his wedding and Bruce could be happy. Unfortunately, doing stuff like that completely messed with the timeline in the worst kind of ways, as Booster would learn. In saving Bruce's parents, he created an alternate reality. Despite Bruce being happy there with his family, it also put Bruce at odds with Selina. She ended up being imprisoned in Arkham in this reality, losing her mind, and hating the Waynes for basically closing the orphanage and putting her in Arkham Asylum. Booster attempts to remind Batman and Catwoman in this alternate reality how much they love each other, but instead, their meetup kinda just results in a whole lot of death. When he goes back in time to try and stop himself from ever saving Batman's parents, knowing what kind of mayhem it causes in that alternate future, Bruce from the alternate timeline goes with him to make sure he isn't able to stop his past self from saving the Waynes. Ha ha ha. However, future Booster does succeed, causing alternate Bruce in grief to take his own life. It's all pretty awful. Everything gets fixed in terms of the timeline, but Booster definitely bears emotional scars from this whole experience. To be honest, Booster probably has a lot of trauma from time travel experiences. If you want to check out this story for yourself, you can read how it all unfolds in Tom King's Batman run during the Gift story arc, which starts in issue 45. 45 to 47, I think. I think it's a three-parter.
Kicking off the list today at number 10 is Conan the Barbarian. Conan was born on a carnage-strewn battlefield in the hills of the westernmost region of Chimeria, all the way back in the Hyborian Age, aka around 13 to 10,000 BC. The fact that Conan was born on a battlefield was considered to be an omen that Conan would grow up to be a great warrior one day, and that was not wrong. He was one of the most accomplished swordsmen of the Hyborian Age and is often listed alongside King Arthur, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Zorro as one of the greatest fictional male sword fighters in history, which is a really cool thing to put on a resume. Conan has unusual strength, agility, and speed for a human being. He has lifted immense objects or enemies, even breaking the neck of a raging bull when he was still pretty young. It is said that he has the strength equivalent of about 10 to 20 men, but he has been knocked over by just 2 dudes before, so don't take that as a fact. More often than not, Conan relies upon his lightning-fast reflexes in combat situations, and they very rarely let him down. On top of that, he has a massive level of durability, and through years of dealing with sorcerers, magicians, and witches, he has even developed a moderate level of resistance to magic and mind control spells. Conan is a master warrior. He has a hardy survival instinct, is a master of stealth, and is multilingual. While primarily known as a wandering sellsword, Conan progressively became a master tactician, leading entire armies into battle, and eventually, Conan even became the king of Aquilonia, and also eventually a hero interacting with the heroes of the modern day. In at number 9, it's Red Sonja. If we are talking about Conan the Barbarian, then we need to talk about Red Sonja, because not only is she from the same time period, she's arguably even more capable than Mr. Barbarian himself. Red Sonja lived with her family in a humble home in the western Hyrcanian steppes. I don't know if I pronounced that right, so let me know in the comments down below. When she had just turned 17 years old, a group of mercenaries attacked, taking the lives of her father, Ivor, her mother, and her 2 younger brothers, and burning their house and all their possessions to the ground. Now she survived, but was then horribly mistreated by the leader of that group. Understandably, Sonja raged for some revenge. Answering this, the red goddess Skatok appeared to her and instilled incredible skill in the handling of swords and other weapons under the condition that she would never lay with a man unless he defeated her in combat, which is a weird kind of thing to say, I guess. Going forward as Red Sonja, she honed her skills with the blade and became a sellsword, eventually even slaying the evil wizard Kulan Gath, but he came back. Red Sonja was one of the most powerful and skilled swordsmen in any era, among both men and women. She was also in peak human physical condition, a martial arts expert, and possessed knowledge and experience in fighting the supernatural. And she beat Conan. So, number 8, Hercules. Hercules is the son of Zeus, Skyfather and supreme ruler of the gods of Olympus, and Alcmena, a mortal woman who lived over 3,000 years ago. Athena, the goddess of wisdom, arranged for her father Zeus to have a half-mortal son to be the world's champion. Zeus seduced the mortal queen Alcmena, pretending to be her husband, King Amphitryon. I'm sorry if I pronounced that too. Alcmena gave birth to the baby Hercules, and as an adult demigod in ancient Greece, Hercules achieved worldwide worldwide fame as he became the greatest hero of the ancient world, best known for his 12 labors. As the Olympian god of strength as well, Hercules' strength is unlimited, making him one of the strongest and most powerful heroes in the Marvel Universe. As an infant, he was breastfed by his stepmother, Hera, queen of the Olympian gods, which increased his already demigod physiology to godlike levels. Hercules possessed the superhuman physical attributes of an Olympian god, but interestingly, some of his powers are actually superior to the vast majority of the other gods. Most recently, he has been a member of the Guardians of the Galaxy, but he has also been part of the Avengers, the God Squad, Council of Godheads, the Mighty Avengers, the Secret Avengers, the Defenders, the Heroes for Hire, and, of course, S.H.I.E.L.D. Coming in at number 7 today is Dream. The Endless, featured in DC's Sandman story, are a group of 7 siblings: Death, Destiny, Despair, Desire, Delirium, Destruction, and the focus of our point today, Dream. These siblings represent fundamental aspects and forces of the Vertigo/DC universe, and are all immortal, ageless, and pretty much nigh omnipotent. The parents of the Endless were revealed to be Time, the embodiment of all time itself, father of the Endless, and Night, the embodiment of the infinite darkness that existed before the dawn of the universe, and mother of the Endless. So it's safe to say that these beings are probably pretty ancient, like 10 billion years old ancient. As for Dream himself, or Morpheus, he isn't so much a superhero as we are used to, but he is an extremely powerful, reluctant hero is what I would say, and his journey to that status, from emotionless god to a being displaying very human-like emotions and characteristics, is the fundamental story of the Sandman itself. Dream dwells in a realm called the Dreaming, from where he controls the fundamental concepts of fantasy and reality in the universe, as the line between the waking world and the dream world is quite thin. Coming in at number 6, it's Odin. While the god of thunder Thor almost made this list, his father was, and sometimes is, still a hero, and he is much older than his son, as you might be able to guess, because father and son relationships be like that. While Marvel plays a little fast and loose with Thor's age, it most recently has been said to be roughly 4,000 years old, but his daddy? Marvel Comics changed Odin's age a few times for the sake of stories, but we can assume that Odin is quite old, far more than a million years, as Odin was part of the Avengers of 1 million BC, and by that time, he was seemingly in his prime like Thor is now. So yes, the All-Father, creator of Asgard and ruler of the Norse pantheon of gods, is pretty damn old. Who would have thought? Not me. But he is certainly no pushover. Being the protector of the 10 realms, he is the strongest and wisest of all Asgardians. In his physical prime, he could lift 90 tons, but that number can be boosted up a whole lot to a whole other level thanks to Odin's ability to tap into the Odin Force, which has allowed him to headbutt Galactus into unconsciousness, which is really impressive. As an example of the power he wields, Odin had a fight with Seth, another god, which was waged on several planes of existence simultaneously and felt across infinite planes of reality. The energy released from their battle was so powerful, it shattered entire galaxies, reignited dying suns, and ripped the fabric of the multiverse itself. So, yeah. He's pretty nuts. Number 5, the Immortal. Due to an accident that happened approximately 3,000 years ago in the Image Comics Invincible universe, the man who became the Immortal was exposed to an unknown anomaly that gave him superhuman abilities that put him almost on par with Viltrumites. Outside of his incredible strength, speed, durability, stamina, and flight powers, the Immortal is, you guessed it, immortal. Oh. Able to regenerate at an insanely fast rate, regrowing limbs and organs, not needing food, water, or oxygen to survive, and being immune to all poisons, toxins, venoms, viruses, bacteria, parasites, pathogens, and allergens. However, funnily enough, there is a way to, quote, kill him. If the Immortal's head is separated from his torso, it needs to be manually reattached for his healing factor to finally kick in. But despite that, even when they aren't attached, he still remains perfectly preserved until the reattachment happens. He's been around for so long that he has been a knight, possibly under King Arthur, an explorer connected to Christopher Columbus in the Spanish Armada. He fought in the American Revolution, became President of the United States by taking the alias of Abraham Lincoln, became President of the United States by taking the alias of someone you may know, Abraham Lincoln, and he fought as a soldier in the First World War. In the 1930s is when he finally officially became a superhero, and more recently became a member of the Guardians of the Globe. Coming in at number 4, Exodus. Grand Duke Benny du Paris was a 12th century nobleman from medieval France, so he is probably one of the youngest people to make this list. As an adult, Bennet was a crusader for the Knights Templar sent to Jerusalem during the Crusades, and he even became best friends with Eobar Garrington, the Black Knight of that era. The two had set out on a quest to find the Tower of Power, when his abilities manifested after an encounter with the Phoenix Force. This granted Bennet some pretty powerful telepathic powers, but pretty quickly, these powers were then improved upon thanks to the mutant Apocalypse, and his ability to augment other individuals. Unfortunately, Apocalypse also caused Exodus to be trapped in a tomb until the modern day when he was awoken by Magneto and joined his cause, which you think would make him a villain, but he has become more of a hero as time has gone on. Exodus is one of the most powerful psionic mutants in existence, with such a pristine use of telekinesis and telepathy that he can even alter electrons and molecules. His power is so strong that Marvel even had to debuff him by making his powers dependent on his or others' level of faith in him. Still, pretty powerful though. Number 3, the Eternals. Way back in the day, the Celestials came to Earth when proto-humans began to emerge, meaning around 2 to 5 million years ago. That's a long freaking time. The Celestial first host performed genetic experiments on those early humans, resulting in 3 groups: the immortal and superior Eternals, the pretty grotesque and monstrous deviants, and just plain Jane regular humans. The Eternals, aka Homo Immortalis, were basically created to defend the planet Earth, specifically from the deviants, and to serve Celestials. They became somewhat silent defenders of Homo sapiens, that's us, secluding themselves and rarely directly engaging with us. They built super impressive cities like Olympia, Titanos, Oceania, and Polaria, and their names have become intertwined with heroes throughout ancient history, like Gilgamesh. They are all incredibly powerful, and they are all immortal, being reborn if they ever actually are defeated. An average Eternal is intertwined with cosmic energy and can lift about 15 tons without using any form of telekinesis, but a few are able to lift up to 100 tons. Other Eternals specialize in different powers like telepathy and telekinesis, and all Eternals have the ability to join with one another to form the Unimind, made of light, mind, and pure energy. And I haven't even talked about the massive Eternals called the Hex, and I'm not going to, because we're moving on. Coming in at number 2, Eternal Warrior. Gilad Anipada from Valiant Comics was ancient before the rise of the Pharaohs, and apparently will also survive the fall of nations yet to come. Gilad, also known as the Eternal Warrior, is the youngest of 3 Eternal brothers. His siblings are Ivar, aka Time Walker, and Aram, aka Armstrong. They are all immortal and were born before recorded history, so that's a long time ago. The Eternal Warrior himself is a sworn protector to the Geomancers, who are basically humans who have a special bond with the spirit of the earth itself. When the current Geomancer is accidentally taken out by Obadiah Archer, Gilad is driven by his duty to track down Obadiah and exact revenge. Only problem is, Archer happens to be one half of Archer and Armstrong. Armstrong being Gilad's older brother that we just talked about, who he hasn't spoken to in decades. Armstrong tries to protect his best buddy Archer from his brother, but the relentless Gilad eventually catches up to them, and the duo's only solution now is to find a new Geomancer. Archer and Armstrong eventually track down the new Geomancer, Kay McHenry, who convinces Gilad to not obliterate the duo, which Gilad is more than capable of doing with his thousands of years of fighting experience, his mastery in tactics, and being one of the greatest warriors on Earth. Not to mention his exceptional strength, inhuman durability, and endurance, and the ability to heal from pretty much any wound. And finally, in at number 1, it's Martian Manhunter. Martian Manhunter, aka John Johns, or John Jones on Earth, is the last of his race of Martians, and he is extremely powerful, and should never be slept on, but he usually is. He speaks with the resolve and intelligence of someone who's been around for a very hot minute, and that's because he has been. According to DC, he is in the ballpark of around, or over, 220 million years old. John arrived on Earth after he was pulled there through space and time by a teleportation beam during an experiment conducted by Dr. Saul Erdel, who passed away from the shock of actually finding a Martian shortly after this. But way before that, John's race was practically wiped out a long time ago, leaving him completely alone and isolated. But now, pulled forward in time and finally on Earth with no one to tell him what the hell was going on, he eventually used his his shape-shifting abilities to become a detective operating in Middletown, America. For a long time, he mainly operated from the safety of his human persona before he eventually exposed himself to the world, not like that, and became a founding member of the Justice League, and also one of its most powerful and ancient members as well.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Superwoman. For this week, we'll be taking a look at Kristen Wells' Superwoman. She first appeared in DC Comics Presents Annual number 2. Now, she's from the 29th century. Kristen was a history student who traveled back in time to discover the origins of Miracle Monday, a universal holiday. She was quite committed to the craft, and it didn't take long for her to become Professor Wells. Her next field trip was a little more intense. Now she traveled to the 20th century to discover the secret identity of Superwoman, only to find out it was her the whole time. See, this Superwoman version of her took future tech, traveled back in time, and then saved the day alongside Superman at some point. Then she helped him take down King Cosmos. It was a pretty big deal. And then Wells traveled back to the future to tell the people the secret identity. It's kind of confusing in the brain. And they're all pretty shocked, but they're thrilled nonetheless. They gather and they celebrate Kristen's accomplishments that technically haven't happened yet in their timeline. What an odd party. Hey Kristen, great job. She's like, thanks, it was hard. Number 9, Rip Hunter. Making his first appearance in Booster Gold issue 13, Hunter is a guardian of the Time Stream and leader of the Time Masters. Not bad on the resume. Rightfully so. I mean, right from the start, this guy was preparing for enemies a time traveler would face. He was worried somebody would go back in time and prevent him from being born, so he got ahead of the game, or behind it rather, and then he hid the details of his birth from the public. I have to include Rip Hunter because we mentioned Booster Gold in our last futuristic hero list. Rip Hunter is the son of Booster Gold, but not even Booster knows that, so no one tell him, no one text him. Hunter has seen many days being a time traveler, of course. He was one that witnessed the birth of the new multiverse, and he played a major role in the defeat of Mr. Mind. He of course is a genius when it comes to temporal machines, but when you have literally all that time on your hands, you have time to kill and therefore time to train. Rip Hunter killed time by studying martial arts from BC to the end of time. So you don't want to mess with him in any timeline or else you'll get choked out in some era's version of Taekwondo, you know? Guys, before we continue on with this list, you know the drills, nerds. If you want to go ahead and give that video a thumbs up, it really helps us out here a bit. You're the best, thank you so much. Let's get right back to this list. You know, quick little intermission. Number 8, Adam Strange. Adam Strange was once a normal dude. He was an archaeologist working in South America when all of a sudden he was transported to the planet of Ron. The Zeta Beam signed him out of work early that day. You always want it to happen. You're like, come on Zeta Beam, I'm tired. The leader of Ron, Sardath, teleported Adam there, and then Strange didn't waste any time. He got a flight pack, he got a ray gun, the whole Mandalorian package. He was on board. The Radians and him got along famously. It was pretty good so far. He even charmed Sardath's daughter over there, and they eventually fell in love. Now the beam effect wore off, so he did eventually return to Earth, but after predicting where the next Zeta Beam would hit, Adam scheduled those trips, those archaeological trips, around that location. He needed to marry Alana, so he has to check in with the fam. I get it. Now it turns out this beam wasn't too leisurely, it had purpose. Radians were becoming more and more sterile, so this beam was actually searching for a suitable mate on all these planets. So Adam met the Justice League after assisting in a battle with Kanjiro, but when he was offered membership, he declined it, because he was too committed with the Radians. The jetpack and the ray gun, I mean, he's obviously busy, he's shooting things flying around, he's got his hands full, literally. Number 7, Caleb. Caleb of Hedros made his first appearance in Superman the Man of Steel Annual, issue 5. He's from the Legends of the Dead Earth crossover, when Lex Luthor XL activated Krypton Protocol. Now at this point, Lex was the leader of the Galactic Empire, some Star Wars level villain stuff here. His goal was to destroy every planet that met the specifications for a Superman to be born. So basically, if a planet showed potential, if it had a yellow star, his solution was just to Dr. Evil laser beam the planet into extinction, and then nothing will happen. Not a bad plan, I mean it's kind of brutal, but I guess it would work. So his target was this planet, Hedros. Now thankfully brave rebels also exist in this universe, so they snuck onto the planet and saved the last remaining inhabitant, Caleb. So once he got off this doomed planet, as Lex predicted, he became the Man of Steel. Number 6, Wave Rider. Matthew Ryder made his first appearance in Armageddon 2001. He's a time traveler who comes from a dark future. I love old comics when they talk about the future because the year that Matthew came from is only 9 years away from today. Yeah, he's from the year 2030. Will there be flying cars, hoverboards, Avatar 2? Nope, it's actually going to be ruled by Monarch. Spoiler alert, it's pretty bad. At this point in time, he's wiped out most of Earth's heroes. It's not looking too helpful, so Matthew was rescued during this madness by a hero named Bennett Dilly. Matthew volunteered himself to travel back in time and hopes to figure out what turned Monarch evil. Now the past year's subjects never made it, but Matt Rayner did. Thank God. Now, not only that, when he entered the time stream, he was transformed into Wave Rider. So now he's able to surf through time whenever he feels like it. The classic go back in time but get powers during the commute. Awesome, we love it. He's also the king of spoilers, because his new powers allow him now to see into somebody's probable future by merging with them. Imagine bumping into this guy and you're like, oh, sorry. He's like, hey, no worries, good luck on your pilot test. They're like, what? He eventually joined the Linear Men and helped Superman quite a bit when Doomsday returned the first time. He offered details on Doomsday's origin, and he took Doomsday to the end of time, which sounds permanent, but Brainiac was still able to revive Doomsday. But we love the effort. Wave Rider is great, ladies and gentlemen, just don't binge watch any shows with him. He'll spoil the last season before it's even filmed. Number 5, Bart Allen. Making his first full appearance in The Flash Volume 2, Issue 92, Bart Allen was the grandson of Barry Allen, and his father was Don Allen, and his mother was Melanie Thawne, descendant of Flash villains Cobalt Blue and Professor Zoom. Now, Bart was of course born with his grandfather's gift of, traveling at light speed, but he also aged at hyperspeed too, which is concerning. When he was only 2 years old, his body was already at age 12. President Thawne had the Dominators abduct Bart so they could do experiments and all that evil stuff, but they ended up creating a clone of Bart called Inertia. Now, Bart was of course going to die earlier than most people because of his aging problem, so Iris West took him to the 20th century to the third Flash, Wally West, so he could teach Bart how to control his speed and, not perish and still stay alive. Bart came back later as Impulse and was one of the founding members of Young Justice. Number 4, Calcula. Also known as the Ancient One, Calcula was originally around in comics for a year, starting with Warlord issue 5. Calcula was the Atlantean god of light and was considered one of the most powerful mages in ancient Atlantis history. Being a follower of the Lords of Order and being born before creation itself, Calcula and Dark Magistra had some powerful offspring, Orion and Garn Danuth. Now, Orion was a demigod, and Garn Danuth grew up to become an agent of order. All this power running through the family tree, but where did it come from? Calcula came from Darkworld. He was a protector of the creator of said realm. Kind of a big deal. Now, it didn't take long for him to become a sorcerer king, and then he liberated Atlantis, and before you know it, him and his wife Magistra and 10 other mages created the Zodiac Crystals, which are basically these statues that were patterned after all the Zodiac signs. So if you're into crystals, there you go. This cult couple didn't last too long because Magistra unfortunately joined the dark side. Calcula stayed pure. He declared himself to pure white magic. Perhaps the best part of this guy is his ability to see the past, present, and future. DC Comics Presents issue 75 is a trip. A lot of time travel goodness in those old pages. You gotta go check it out. Number 3, John Fox. Making his first appearance in Flash Special Issue 1, John Fox resided comfortably in the year 2645. He was a historian for the National Academy of Science in Central City, and his life changed when the radioactive villain Manfred Moda showed up. He was causing destruction, the world was in chaos because of this guy, so the Academy decided, you know what, let's just send John back in time because we're in the future and we can do that. Hey, what's up? And then John can grab a Flash or two, come back, and then all of them can help us take down Moda. Now, the plan, of course, didn't work because it's easier said than done. He couldn't get any Flashes to come back to the future with him, but during this cosmic commute, John himself got super speed, which is almost a better alternative, if you ask me. He quickly suited up and took down Moda himself. Quite impressive. This sounds like a dream scenario, but John lost his job when speed robots came into the picture. Damn robots taking our jobs, even in 2645. This is relentless. Number 2, Batman. On our last list of futuristic heroes, we mentioned Thomas Wayne, the Batman of the Flashpoint universe, who is a little dark to say the least. So for this list, we had to mention the time that Batman was sent back in time through Darkseid's Omega Beams. It's super fun and also really stressful. This happens during the 6-parter written by Grant Morrison, Final Crisis. Now, it appears Bruce is dead during the story, but later on it's revealed in Return of Bruce Wayne that he just took a trip through time. He was sent back to multiple eras. I'm talking the dawn of history. Caveman Bruce Wayne, and then he jumps further in time and there's witches running around. It's really fun to see Bruce use his intellect to get out of these specific eras. That's the whole fun of it. Also, if you've ever wanted to see Batman as the historical pirate Blackbeard, well, now's your chance. Go check it out. And finally, number 1, Green Lantern. Green Lantern power rings are quite impressive. It can be used as a universal translator, it allows its user to communicate telepathically, and in Superman Man of Tomorrow issue 13, Superman goes nuts, so Kyle Rayner created kryptonite with the ring. It's pretty impressive, but you also may forget that the ring allows for one to time travel. Hal Jordan traveled to the 70th century once. He was brought into the far future to take down an evil government, but in doing so, the ring required enormous amounts of will and energy. So in turn, he ended up losing his memories and started going by the alias Paul Manning. So there was a point where Green Lantern was a superhero in 2 timelines, and that's why he's number 1.
Starting off our list at number 10 is Xena, Warrior Princess. I bet you didn't expect to see this one. Sure, Xena, Warrior Princess started out as a TV show, but the character was popular enough to get a few comic book series all of her own. From bigger publishers too, like Dark Horse and Dynamite Comics. Way back in the day, in her early 20s, Xena proved to be a courageous leader when she led her village against a local warlord. But they were defeated, and Xena, being one of the only survivors, was banished. Eventually, she formed a relationship with another warlord known as Boreas, and she even joined him, becoming a warlord herself. Xena the Warlord became known and feared across ancient China, Siberia, Japan, Norway, Britannia, and Greece as a very capable warlord, earning her the name Warrior Princess, but also the name Destroyer of Nations. Luckily, this destroyer changed her ways and instead became a protector of the innocent, traveling with her companions all across the ancient world. Number 9. Hippolyta. This queen's history begins thousands of years ago. Around 1300 BC, the Greek pantheon held a meeting convened by the goddesses. They were discussing the creation of a race of humans that would champion their ideals. Now, the male gods, including Zeus and Ares, did not seem too interested, and Hera did not wish to go against her husband, so it was left to the other 5 primary Greek goddesses. They decided to travel into the underworld, where they came upon the Well of Souls, where the souls of all the women who were taken out by man's hatred were gathered. The goddesses took these souls and went and dropped them into a lake in Greece. The souls mixed with the clay and the stone of the lake bed to form the Amazons, and the first one to emerge from the waters was Hippolyta. The goddesses appointed Hippolyta to be queen, and they decreed that the Amazons were to spread the message of peace, tolerance, and equality by being super dope warriors. Yes, Wonder Woman is also pretty ancient too, but Mama came first, so here we are. Number 8. Black Adam. Okay, so there are 2 different main origin stories for Black Adam. In the pre-New 52 era of DC, circa 1200 BC, the wizard Shazam became a high priest to the pharaoh Ramses II of Egypt. This is where he met the young prince Teth Adam of Kahndaq. Teth Adam was Ramses' son. Teth Adam impressed the wizard with his fairness and decency, and boom, he was granted the power. But in the more recent continuity, Teth Adam was born in Egypt in the 26th century BCE along the banks of the Nile as part of the Kahndaqi tribe, and it didn't take too long for him to be forced into a life of unwilling servitude. His entire family lost their lives except for his nephew Ammon. Ammon would save Teth Adam's life, which got him the recognition of the wizard Shazam, who turned Ammon into his champion. Ammon shared this power with his uncle Teth Adam, but not seeing eye to eye on how to use the power, Black Adam took his own nephew off the board and stole his power. This was way before he was either banished, stuck in a scarab, or locked away in a tomb, depending on which era you want to talk about. Also, for the trolls out there, I know Adam is primarily a villain, but he has also been a hero, even joining the Justice Society and the Justice League, so get off my back. Number 7. XO Manowar. In the world of Valiant Comics' XO Manowar, a long time ago, aka 402 AD, a barbarian tribe known as the Visigoths were battling the Romans for territory in Italy. One of these barbarians was Eric of Dacia, a warrior of the Visigoths and the nephew of the king. After the Romans sneakily captured the barbarians' women and children, Eric gathered together a group of warriors and went off to attack the Romans at night. On their way to the Roman stronghold though, the Visigoths came across strangely dressed warriors who turned out to be an alien species known as the Vine. Using their advanced weapons, the Vine easily defeated the barbarians, and the remaining Visigoths were taken aboard the alien mothership. Now, whilst being herded on board the ship, Eric and his friends managed to overpower their jailer and escape to find shelter within another area of the ship, where they witnessed a Vine ritual in which a priest presented a chosen warrior with a semi-sentient armor called Shanhara. After a number of years, Eric and the others finally managed to gather enough tools and escape their cages. They made their way to the armory, where they found themselves trapped by Commander Trill and his soldiers. But in what could have been their final moments, Shanhara had deemed Eric worthy, granting him superhuman abilities and the means to escape his captors, eventually becoming a hero in the modern era. Number 6. Valkyrie. There have been a few people to take up the role of Valkyrie, but the first was Brunhilde. Back in the day, Odin realized that he needed to give man a paradise to live in after passing on. Thank you. Odin chose a princess named Brunhilde to be his Valkyrie, making her responsible for taking the souls of the warriors who perished in battle with honor and bringing them to Valhalla. Brunhilde led the rest of the Valkyrie as a group of warrior goddesses who would appear over the battlefields of mortal worshippers of the Asgardian gods and choose which of them were worthy to be taken to Valhalla. Brunhilde led this group for centuries. Like the other Asgardians, Brunhilde had godly powers, but she also possessed some Valkyrie-specific traits like the ability to perceive and sense the coming of death on a person, the power to teleport to Asgard through willpower, and she was one of the most capable fighters the Asgardians had to offer outside of Thor and maybe a few others. Number 5. Gaia. Speaking of Thor though, last time we talked about Thor's papa, Odin, and for this list I think we should talk about Thor's mama, Gaia. Gaia was one of the elder gods who materialized on Earth way before any life ever appeared here. Unfortunately, the rest of the gods, following the example of the serpent elder god Set, started consuming each other, which turned all but Gaia into demons. In order to better protect life on Earth, Gaia summoned the Demiurge and mated with it to give birth to her first son ever, Demogorge the God Eater. This Demogorge devoured all the demons except those that escaped, like Set and Chthon. Gaia then merged with the Earth itself and dedicated herself to guiding evolution, and that sounds pretty heroic to me. She is one of the oldest and most powerful deities in Marvel Comics, which makes her and Odin's eventual son, Thor, even more of a force to be reckoned with. Number 4. Hawkman. Hawkman is a bit of a doozy to talk about. Essentially, he has two main origins. He was either a space cop or a reincarnated prince. Since we are talking old and ancient today, we will focus on the reincarnated prince story. Basically, Hawkman's secret identity is Carter Hall, an archaeologist and museum curator who is actually a reincarnation of the ancient Egyptian prince Khufu. Khufu, who would become known as Hawkman, discovered an alien spacecraft from the planet Thanagar, powered by an anti-gravity metal element called the Nth metal, which transformed his soul and doomed him and his love to be reincarnated over and over and over again throughout time. Some of his incarnations include Brian Kent, the Silent Knight from 5th century Britain, Conrad von Grimm, the son of a blacksmith in 14th century Germany, Captain John Smith of the 16th century, Hannibal Hawks, the Nighthawk in the American Old West, Detective James Wright, a Pinkerton detective in the 20th century, and finally, Carter Hall himself. Number 3. Venom. Since we all know Venom as being an enemy of Spider-Man, it's easy to forget that he has been around for a much longer amount of time than the web slinger himself, at least in the fictional world. The symbiote that later became known as Venom was spawned at some point during the reign of the Dark Elder God Null, which is a long one, and there is no specific Earth year when this happened, so it's hard to say just how ancient this symbiote actually is, but we know he had a life long before encountering Spider-Man. Unfortunately, the symbiote's memories have all been altered or erased a whole whack of times. It has been said that Venom was the 998th of its lineage, hatching from a clutch of eggs in a cavern on Clintar. That's the symbiote homeworld. Though it does have memories of being present on Gore's homeworld as well, so it's a little confusing. Basically, in the ancient past, the symbiote was once the loyal thrall of Null, but at some point the symbiote refused to obey his wishes anymore, and Venom was cast out of the hive, doomed to wander aimlessly across the cosmos. The symbiote eventually discovered the Kree explorers, who decided to harvest it for further study. It was then bonded to a soldier named Tel-Kar and underwent months of training alongside him before they were dispatched to fight in the Kree-Skrull War. Before eventually leaving Tel-Kar, and after a whack more adventures, the symbiote ended up becoming bonded to Spider-Man during Secret Wars. Number 2. Etrigan. Etrigan the demon was the firstborn of Belial, who was such a handful that Belial exiled Etrigan's mother to Masak Mavdil and told his son that his antics drove her away. That's a bad dad. I don't think this is the son's fault. His antics that we just talked about ended up even driving Belial out of hell for several decades, returning with another son born of a mortal witch named Merlin. Etrigan was originally summoned to Earth to serve Merlin in a desperate final attempt to protect Camelot from the evil witch Morgane Le Fay. Merlin bound the demon to a mortal man named Jason, and while Merlin went into hiding to rest, these two lived a very long and brutal life through history. Basically, how it would go is that Etrigan incited war and strife, and in return, Jason gained wealth and status. Not a horrible idea, but despite sharing the same body, the demon and his host are usually at odds with each other, and Jason retains a lot of guilt based on Etrigan's actions, which I think played a part in him being a bit more heroic, or as heroic as a demon can be. But finally, in at number 1, It's Thor. Being the son of Odin the Allfather, who appeared in part 1, and Gaia, an elder god who appeared on this list, Thor is incredibly old, approximately 4,000 years, although at other times it has been said to be even longer. Thor has all the incredible powers of the Asgardians, but boosted to a whole other level thanks to his mother's elder god status. As the god of strength as well as thunder, he is one of the strongest Marvel characters, being able to either defeat or stalemate astronomically stronger beings like the Midgard Serpent, the Hulk, the Silver Surfer, Gladiator, and Hercules. His stamina lets him basically fight forever, and he's next to completely invulnerable, not to mention his weather and energy manipulation and the use of his hammer, which make this guy almost impossible to bring down. Even when he isn't in possession of his hammer and is just Thor Odinson, he is still a force to be reckoned with, and especially recently, he keeps getting more and more boost to his power. This character has been around for an incredibly long time, and he just gets more and more powerful as time goes on.
Number 10. Clock King number 2. Clock King the Second? There have been a few Clock Kings over the years, and even in fact 2 Clock Kings the Seconds. There's been 2 of those, if you can believe that. The one we're talking about here, however, is the Clock King who is associated with the Terror Titans. This DC villain wasn't necessarily from the future, but did have precognitive abilities that linked him to the future. He could see close to 5 seconds in the future if you're rounding up. He would use his precognitive abilities to predict his enemies' moves and reactions, making him a fairly formidable villain, at least in comparison to some of the other Clock Kings who are really just guys obsessed with clocks and time. Number 9. New 52 Clock King. Yep, we never get to talk about Clock King, which means you know I'm gonna try and shine a spotlight on him here. Clock King's pretty cool. Despite him being kind of a weird villain originally, Clock King has actually had multiple versions, and that's just in the comics. He's also had live action and even animated versions of himself, despite being kind of an odd duck, at least to begin with. Sometimes referred to as Clock King III in terms of his overall appearances, but actually the first Clock King to have appeared in the New 52 continuity, this version is probably the most powerful version of the character. Well, it's kind of a toss-up between this version and the previous one that I just talked about, so you could decide for yourself who you think is more powerful, but I think this one's just a little bit more powerful. Initially, it appears as though he can actually manipulate time, sending people back through their own time stream, but later we learned that he actually employs hallucinogenic gas simply to make it seem like he's doing that. However, I'm not really super convinced on that. I'm sure hallucinations are involved in some way, but how do you make someone specifically hallucinate moments of their past? I guess perhaps through suggestion? Just seems a little suspicious. This version of Clock King appeared in the first issue of the 2016 Deathstroke series, and also reappeared in the Deathstroke Rebirth comic. Basically, if you're a villain and you face off with Deathstroke, I feel like you're pretty cool, and I feel like you deserve a place on a powerful list. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists like it where we talk about cool time-traveling future villains, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Magistrate. Initially, the Magistrate was thought of as a figurehead for some dark and sinister organization prior to Future State comics being released, and based on the synopses that we got for that event/comic line. However, once we finally got into the future state of Gotham and got the comics, we learned that Magistrate was actually more a paramilitary force which had taken hold over Gotham. And now in the current run of Batman, it's made to seem like the Magistrate was actually a program launched by Simon Saint to help Gotham fight against crime and masked vigilantes, good or bad alike. Either way, the Magistrate is definitely a frightening antagonist, especially in the sense that it's not one that you can directly hit, as it's not a physical character, but more of an idea or concept that needs to be dismantled. Number 7. Savior. Savior is the future version of Tim Drake from the Titans Tomorrow alternate reality. Here, Tim Drake ended up taking on the mantle of Batman, but would eventually become known as the vigilante Savior. You might be thinking, but Tim Drake is a good guy. He's not evil. What are you talking about? And normally, you'd be right. But in this reality, Tim doesn't end up quite as heroic as the main counterpart had hoped he'd grow up to be. This version of Tim comes to us from a much darker timeline, one where everything got so bad that he and his fellow Titans, known as actually one of the 2 different opposing Titans teams in the future, ended up adopting a zero-tolerance policy for criminals. Eventually, this future version of Tim Drake even ends up wielding the gun used to kill Martha and Thomas Wayne in his fight for vengeance. Basically, he becomes OG Batman, but even darker. Number 6. Brother Eye. Brother Eye isn't necessarily a villain who exists exclusively in the future, but in Future's End, it is an entity that takes over the world, so I feel like we can count it for that fact. Also, Brother Eye is pretty future-y in terms of its concept. Brother Eye was initially created to be a hero, protecting the world from any threat. In Future's End, the artificial intelligence was created by Batman and Mr. Terrific, but its prime directive ended up kinda corrupting it. Brother Eye came to realize that humanity's greatest threat was actually humanity itself, and sought for complete control over the people of planet Earth, seeing this as the only way to protect them from themselves. It's that age-old AI warning story. Be careful what you wish for, or one day AI technology may just rise up and realize how awful you really are and either hold you prisoner for the rest of your life or just kill you. You know the one. Number 5. Zoom. Zoom might not be a villain who is from the future, but he is a villain who could potentially access it and who has gone back to the past, therefore being from the future at that point, to mess about with Wally West's life. Hunter Zolomon was once a good friend and colleague of Wally West's. He had a rough life, and after Wally refused to help him by going back in time and reversing a severe injury of Hunter's, he'd lost the ability to walk and was basically now confined to a wheelchair. Hunter decided he needed to step up and help Wally become the hero he was meant to be. Hunter actually has twisted but ultimately altruistic intentions at heart. His goal is to make Wally's life miserable and give him a more tragic backstory so that Wally would end up being a better hero in the future, more inclined to help other people with their problems because he would understand them better. Of course, the reason the Flash did not decide to help Hunter is because he knew how dangerous messing with the time stream was. He was like, we can't just do that. But to Hunter, who had suffered throughout his life, he didn't see that as the real reason behind Wally wouldn't help. He was like, nah, that's not what it is, it's just you don't get it. Let me go make your life miserable and then you'll get it. You're welcome. Number 4. Savitar from the Arrowverse. This villain is actually a time remnant of Barry Allen and is a combination of the comic book versions of Savitar and Future Flash. Savitar is what ends up happening to Barry Allen if he decides to go down a much darker path. Being spurned by his friends, Team Flash, he instead sets out to become the very thing that ruined his own life. He becomes obsessed with power and aims to become a god. Savitar looks super futuristic and could be considered to be even more powerful than the main continuity version of Barry Allen from CW's The Flash. Savitar also possesses the artifact known as the Philosopher's Stone, made out of pure Speed Force energy. The Philosopher's Stone grants Savitar additional powers and rule over alterations made to reality. With it, he additionally becomes a powerful telepath. Number 3. Monarch. Monarch was actually revealed to be Hawk of Hawk and Dove, aka Hank Hall. But before we knew that, we simply knew Monarch as a tyrant ruling in a futuristic post-apocalyptic world. It turned out the death of Dove was what had prompted him to turn villain. Though, surprise surprise, Hank would later learn it was him himself from the future as Monarch who was responsible for killing Dove in the past. Gasp. Hawk would eventually go on to take up another villainous mantle, becoming known as Extant. As Extant, or Extant, Hank would team up with former Green Lantern Hal Jordan, now known as Parallax, during the events of Zero Hour. So yeah, pretty mega bad. Hal and Hank together plan to manipulate time in order to alter reality, making it as they wanted it to be. You know, if you're doing that, you're probably in the wrong. Number 2. Reverse Flash. One of the most powerful villains out there when it comes to villains from the future is Reverse Flash, aka Eobard Thawne. This villain has found a special kind of way to torment his arch nemesis Barry Allen, and even hurt him so much that Barry at one point killed him out of fear of what he would do to those that he loved. That's how much Reverse Flash had messed him up. We'd also learn later on that Eobard was responsible for one of the most tragic and pivotal moments in Barry's life, the death of his mom, Nora Allen. Many people for years believed it was Barry's father who had committed the crime, causing even more grief for young Barry and his family throughout his life. Number 1. Time Trapper. He's a time trap. Or she, depending on which story you're reading in regards to this character's true identity. Multiple true identities over here. Time Trapper has been implied to be a few different people when it comes to their true identity. One of the more notable folks who has been the implied true identity of the villain is Superboy Prime. If that was true, or I guess when that was true perhaps I should say, then that would make Time Trapper pretty crazy powerful, both strength-wise and of course power-wise as well. The Time Trapper throughout the years has been shown to have crazy control over time. They can block time travel, manipulate someone else's time stream, aging them prematurely for example, and can even take entire planets out of time, slicing pieces of that time off to capture them for their own use. It's been theorized by Brainiac 5 that what Time Trapper really may be is a sentient alternate timeline, forever in a constant battle or struggle with the main one.
And at 10, Hercules. I think we all know the story of Hercules, whatever version you remember. The Disney animated movie, the DC version, the Roman or the Greek version, it's all generally the same thing. And I mean, even after that, this guy has a rap sheet of like 25 other heroic things he did, just like because he wanted to. A major factor in the well-known tragedies surrounding Hercules is the hatred that the goddess Hera, wife of Zeus, had for him. Because while there were many illegitimate offspring that Zeus, sired, let's say, Hercules was the son of an affair that Zeus had with a mortal woman. And not just any mortal woman, but a mortal that Zeus wanted so badly that he disguised himself as her husband in order to lay with her, and ordered Helios, the god of the sun, to not let the sun rise for 72 hours so that his one last night with her would last. Yeah, so not only is he the bastard of a mortal woman, he's also the product of a forced 3-day night, which I guess doesn't really bother anyone living in like Alaska or Norway, because the whole 6 months of night thing, not anything weird.
Number 9. Odin. Odin ended up joining the Stone Age Avengers sometime after he actually was said to have created the humans on Midgard, which was then known as Aesheim. In doing so, he had disappointed his father Bor, who decided to punish Odin by hurting the humans. Now, as someone who often seems pretty detached from human suffering later in his life, it's pretty wild to think that Odin possibly created them and was perhaps one of the first cosmic beings to actually care for them as a superhero. And I know what you're thinking, but Amanda, we all know Odin is super old. Yeah, you know that, but did you know he was this heroic? Because I always find it very surprising myself. Odin ended up returning to Aesheim to act as its protector and also to learn how to better control Mjolnir, which was his hammer at the time. He ended up befriending multiple prehistoric superheroes, joining the Avengers of 1 million BCE, and he also ended up developing a deeply romantic relationship with his teammate, the Lady Phoenix. In fact, it was even revealed that the Phoenix was actually the true mother of his son, Thor, because that's what's happening now, so there we go.
And at 8, Blue Beetle. In 1964, during the Silver Age of comics, Charlton Comics revised the character of Dan Garrett, the original Blue Beetle, for a new Blue Beetle series. Charlton's new Blue Beetle retained the original's name, but no powers or backstory, making him a different character. This Beetle was an archaeologist version of Dan, who obtained a number of superhuman powers including super strength, flight, supervision, ability to generate energy blasts from a mythical scarab that he found during a dig in Egypt, where it had been used to imprison an evil mummified pharaoh, because of course it was, which gave way for the DC Comics version of Jaime Reyes. DC's introduction of Jaime Reyes in 2006 retconned and expanded upon the Blue Beetle mythos, but given that the scarab was found during a dig in Egypt, where it was used as an attempt to overthrow Vandal Savage back in the 26th century BCE. Yeah, that's pretty ancient to me, okay? I mean, the scarab was created by Nabu, for God's sakes.
Number 7. Iron Fist. Fan Fei is the Iron Fist of the Stone Age Avengers, also known as the Avengers of 1 million BCE. Fan Fei is actually the reason why the ritual to become the Iron Fist and gain its unique powers was all about fighting Shao Lao in a battle to the death. This wasn't, however, because Kunlun wanted to challenge Fan at the time and believed she should, be their champion. This actually happened as the result of a punishment. Fan Fei, you see, was a kung fu master who had been trained since birth in Kunlun, but her curiosity of the outside world caused her to sort of leave Kunlun in secret. She came across cavemen who were helpless against the beasts that basically often attacked them, and she decided she was going to help them. Fan sought to help these people by teaching and training them herself in the ways of kung fu. However, it was forbidden in Kunlun to share your knowledge, and when her people found out, they marked her as a criminal. As punishment, her students were brought to Shao Lao and basically fed to the dragon. Forced to watch, Fan Fei went into a rage, breaking her shackles, seeking to share in the same demise as her students, becoming deeply distraught. However, when she went up against Shao Lao, she struck the dragon and her fist went right through, killing it and coating her fist in its blood, giving her the power to channel her chi into fiery fists and leaving her with a dragon mark, which marks her as the Iron Fist.
And at 6, Dr. Fate. Nabu the Wise was a lord of order and cosmic being who arrived at Earth billions of years ago to take on a proactive role in battling the Lords of Chaos. A cosmic being with near limitless magical power, his spirit resides in the Helmet of Fate and is the source of the great power held by those who wear the mantle of Dr. Fate. Dr. Fate is just the helmet fun fact. You all knew that. Dr. Fate's origins begin over 10 billion years ago, which I personally think qualifies as ancient, or maybe even older than that, if there is anything older than that. I don't know. My senior year Comtech teacher was pretty old. But not long after the formation of the universe, were there born two elemental forces, the Lords of Order and the Lords of Chaos. You can kind of see where this conflict is going. On the world called Celia, the Lords of Order manifested themselves, the first sentient race in the universe, and a race of incorporeal magical beings at that. After millennia, circa 3500 BCE, the Lords of Order descended onto Earth and then became Nabu the Wise, who was also an advisor to the pharaohs of Egypt. He's old, okay? I don't know what else I need. I said 10 billion years. I think that's pretty solid.
Number 5, Conan the Barbarian. That's right, Conan is an ancient superhero who actually also hails from Marvel. Not only that, but he was also an Avenger. Despite technically being a Marvel superhero, Conan is also kind of otherworldly, hailing from the sword and fantasy genre of comics. Although for Marvel, Conan is still labeled as an Earth 616 character, hailing from their main comic book reality. He does, however, come from the Hyborian Age, an old hero from the past. But he was one of the heroes still summoned by Doctor Strange and Elektra when they brought together their own team of Savage Avengers to stand against the threat of Kulan Gath. This went down in Jerry Dugan and Adam Gorham's Savage Avengers series, which I still really want to read. It looks super good. It just looks like such a great time. And Conan's presence on the team is definitely part of the reason for my motivation to jump into this series, hopefully in the near future. I have a lot of things to read.
And at 4, Mr. Majestic. I put this here because I like the word majestic, but also this is kind of weird. Mr. Majestic is a Wildstorm comic superhero created by H.K. Prager and Jim Lee. He made his first appearance in Wildcats number 11 as a backup story, but he's known for being the strongest superhero in the Wildstorm universe, and he shares quite a few similarities with Superman. But given that Wildstorm is owned by DC, there shouldn't really be any conflict there. Mr. Majestic is originally from the planet Kara and was known as Magistros, but yeah, this isn't like Superman at all. I don't know what you're talking about. Why are you saying that? He has 2 kids, Kanesha and Magistrate, but there was also an infertility crisis in his homeworld, which resulted in only 1 child per woman. Yeah, so how did this happen? Well, Magistros and Coda warrior Lady Xana, who was also later known as other things, it doesn't matter. They were chosen not to breed, but since Coda warriors became priestesses after giving birth, Xana's mother pretended that Kanesha was stillborn and then claimed to have given birth to her herself. Yeah, so basically Kanesha passed off her daughter as her sister, which is a whole... They're old. It's old. It's an old thing.
Number 3, Starbrand. Vin is the Starbrand in 1 million BCE. He ends up becoming the Starbrand after leaving his tribe. He left them because he believed he did not belong due to the fact that he realized he was gay. Something that seemed to be unacceptable to his people in that time. On his journey, he sought out a garden he had seen in a dream, which it turned out appeared to be the biblical paradise known as the Garden of Eden. Once he found it, he also found Burke. Also no vowels. No vowels for these people in prehistoric times. The 2 men became lovers, but would eventually be separated after Burke died in a deviant attack. It seemed the deviants wanted the garden for themselves. The attack resulted in a cave-in, and while Burke did not survive, Vin did, finding the body of a dinosaur who had previously been the Starbrand. Vin was imbued with its powers and fought against those who had killed Burke. However, in the process, this also destroyed the garden. Vin would go on to become the hero known as Starbrand in his time and join up with the other Stone Age Avengers of 1 million BCE.
But ultimately, in number 2, Doctor Strange Fate. Doctor Strange Fate is the amalgam of Doctor Strange, Charles Xavier, and Dr. Fate. Yeah, they're present in the amalgam universe of Earth 9602, and given that both the Sorcerer Supreme and Dr. Fate are present, I think that this qualifies as ancient. Dr. Fate alone just makes that happen. Strange Fate learned that 2 keys controlled by Access would restore the DC Comics and Marvel Comics universes to their own worlds, which would result in the destruction of the amalgam universe and therefore him. So, to keep his universe intact, Doctor Strange Fate recruits Jade Nova, Skulk, and White Witch to capture Access and bring him to Strange Fate so that the amalgam universe can remain active. But it turns out that he was actually a part of a problem, or a part of the problem. That's a story for another day. But Doctor Strange, yes, the real one, preserved the amalgam universe in a pocket dimension, essentially making it its own multiverse in a sense. But I also bring this up because I like the amalgam universe, okay? It's cool. Iron Lantern, Lobo the Duck, Hell yeah.
Number 1. Man-Thing Sorcerer Supreme. Perhaps even more surprising is a reality where the Man-Things rule the planet. Their version of the 1 million BCE Avengers team is filled exclusively with Man-Things as a result. One of these Man-Things is known as the Sorcerer Supreme on this planet in the reality we know as Earth 91. Unfortunately, we do not get to know too much about this version of Man-Thing, as he is killed by the Masters of Evil when they come to his reality in Avengers Forever issue number 5 from 2022. What we do know is that, like Dr. Stephen Strange and many other Sorcerer Supremes, this Man-Thing does seem to possess a cape, although it is a bit shorter than Strange's, I would say. His version of the Eye of Agamotto, or his version of the Third Eye, I'm not really sure what's going on with this, also seems to be something that he has, but he wears inside his chest, or on his chest. I think Dr. Strange ends up with a third eye at one point, but he's also got the Eye of Agamotto, so I don't know. Instead of Man-Thing wearing this anywhere else or having it on a chain or a necklace, implying, that this eye is a part of him. Or perhaps it's simply, like I said, just a third eye, and it's just on the chest. I feel like that wouldn't be, I guess he doesn't really wear it close because he's a Man-Thing, so actually I guess it'd be fine. Number 10. Punisher 2099. Punisher 2099 is Jacob Gallows. He hails from the alternate dystopian future of Earth 928, where mega corporations pretty much own and run everything on planet Earth. Jacob himself is a police officer working for the Public Eye, a privatized police force owned and operated by Alchemax. After suffering an injustice with his brother, sister-in-law, and mother being killed after a hit was put on them by Kron Stone, the son of Alchemax's CEO, Jake decided to take matters into his own hands. Finding the war journal of the Punisher of years before, he was inspired to become a vigilante all his own, and ended up carrying on Frank Castle's work and title, but with the aid of future technology and tracking. Punisher 2099 would eventually end up with a bionic arm, which also made him an even better fighter than he was previously, boosting his skills. Number 9. Deathlock Prime. There have been a few different versions of Deathlock that we've seen throughout the years. All of them have been pretty futuristic in the sense that they are cyborgs, who also generally come equipped with advanced weaponry. But at least one Deathlock is actually also hailed from the future. The one I'm talking about here is Deathlock Prime, who came from the alternate future of Earth 10511, a reality where Roxxon, typically the corporation behind the creation of Deathlocks in most series, have taken over the entire planet Earth. Deathlocks were employed in this future in a sort of Terminator-esque Skynet way to squash the resistance by traveling back in time and killing the enemies of Roxxon to prevent any of them from rising up in the future. Gotta love that Skynet ploy. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to learn more about future superheroes, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Iron Lad. Iron Lad is a hard one to rank because he's actually a Mortis and therefore also Kang the Conqueror, two very powerful villains in the Marvel Universe who often are known for traveling through time and assuming new identities throughout the years. However, because many of his other identities are considered villainous, we're going to actually rank Iron Lad based on what he was capable of more as Iron Lad, which is why he's a little lower on our list in comparison to if I was ranking him as, Kang. Iron Lad was one of the original members of the Young Avengers, but later learned that he was destined to become the villain known as Kang over time, as he continued to try and set up his future to be perfect. Iron Lad, aka Nathaniel Richards, rebelled against his future self, however, killing Kang and attempting to alter his own future. However, Iron Lad's fate was not so easy to beat, and he would eventually end up working with and becoming his future villainous selves. Selves. There's multiple of them. Selves. Number 7. Captain America 3099. Captain America 3099 is one of the uniforms you can get in Marvel Future Fight, a mobile dungeon crawler style action RPG game set in the Marvel Universe. While we've been to 2099 in the comics, 3099 offers an even more futuristic look at some of our favorite heroes. Cap's 3099 uniform includes a digital, still physical, but appearing kinda holographic, if that makes sense, shield. Cap also sports some interesting pieces of armor, including boots, a chest plate, and pauldrons that also look super futuristic with highlights of glowing neon blue light inlaid into them. This uniform showed up earlier last year and can be unlocked by playing through story mode for the 3rd time, I believe. I think you can still unlock it that way. Number 6. Spider-Man 2099. Spider-Man 2099 is Miguel O'Hara. He hails from the alternate reality belonging to 2099, or really one of the 2099 realities really, Earth 928. In 2099, Miguel becomes Spider-Man as a result of an experimental drug he was pressured to work on as a brilliant geneticist employed by Alchemex. The drug has so far killed a man who he tested it on, which is why Miguel actually tries to leave, but Miguel was forced to try it himself after trying to leave the company, only for his boss to sneak a highly addictive hallucinogenic into his drink that only Alchemex made. Miguel miraculously survived the transformative process, despite the experiment being additionally sabotaged in an attempt to kill him. In the end, Miguel was left with a power set similar to the Spider-Man of the past and ended up becoming the Spider-Man of the future. Since his introduction, Miguel O'Hara has become a huge fan favorite and has even made his way over to Earth 616 for a few team-ups with main continuity Spider-Man Peter Parker. Number 5. Bishop. Bishop is a mutant from an alternate dystopian future, which is kind of a thing with mutants, if you haven't already noticed that before. There are a lot of mutants who come from the future, specifically various different dystopian futures. Lucas Bishop in his future was a mutant who joined up with the XSE in his timeline, known as the Xavier Security Enforcers. Bishop's powers allow him to absorb almost any type of energy, including kinetic energy, even energy from a snowfall, store up said energy, and disperse it using it to boost or heal himself or to fire concussive blasts at his opponents. Number 4. Allfather Doom. In the year 2099, Dr. Doom becomes a hero. There were actually 2 Dooms who appeared, and initially it seemed like the Victor Von Doom that we'd come to know may not actually be the true Doom. After all, he was younger and unscarred at his first appearance. However, this would actually be explained in time, and it would be revealed that the other, more villainous Doom was a brainwashed imposter, Eric Zerny, in truth. In fact, there weren't even just 2 Dooms. There were kind of 3 if you're counting Tiger Wilde, a cyborg who became dictator of Latveria. He didn't necessarily go by the name Dr. Doom, but definitely had a kind of Doom vibe going on with his metal cyborg self and being a tyrannical ruler of Latveria. The real Doom ended up being the last one standing in the end and used his power for good. True, he does set out to conquer the United States, but this is actually a good thing as he aims to do so for heroic reasons, wanting to take down the mega corporations who basically now control all aspects of the nation and its civilians' lives in the future. He even brings back S.H.I.E.L.D., which is pretty good, I think. Number 3. Cable. Probably one of the most powerful superheroes out there, period, is Cable. Cable is little baby Nathaniel Christopher Charles Summers, initially referred to as Baby Christopher in the comics, all grown up. Cable actually goes to the future and then comes back to the past after having a roller coaster of a life. He is the biological son of Scott Summers, aka Cyclops, and Madeline Pryor, aka the Goblin Queen, and also Jean Grey's clone. Jean herself is also a mother to Cable, thinking of him as her own son and having memories implanted in her mind of his childhood. So to Jean, she also is his mom, and to Cable, Jean is also his mom too. Being the child of such powerful mutants means that Cable himself is an immensely powerful telepath and telekinetic, despite the fact that he has to focus a lot of his mental strength on fending off the techno-organic virus, which he was infected with. He's also an immensely skilled combatant capable of time travel. Number 2. Cosmic Ghost Rider. Cosmic Ghost Rider comes to us from a very bleak future where Thanos ends up winning the day. So many bleak futures in Marvel. And I mean Thanos really wins the day, by the way, like in an awful way. Cosmic Ghost Rider was once Frank Castle, who ended up becoming a spirit of vengeance but returned to Earth too late, after everyone was dead and there was basically nothing left to avenge. Driven insane by years of loneliness, he ended up becoming a Herald of Galactus and being granted the power Cosmic in a final bid to try and defeat Thanos. When this failed, he joined the Tyrant himself and became his own Herald, cause I mean what else are you gonna do? However, this reality was wiped from existence when a past version of Thanos met his older self who had destroyed almost everything in the galaxy at that point, King Thanos. Younger Thanos found him pretty pathetic and vowed to never become him, returning home and causing King Thanos' reality to crumble, and King Thanos to never have existed. However, Cosmic Ghost Rider would be given a place in Valhalla, and from there be given the chance to return to the world of the living by Odin himself, who sensed that he was unhappy in Valhalla. Cosmic Ghost Rider is not only super powerful at this point, but has also been around since the beginning of Marvel continuity now, having tons of knowledge about the universe as he ultimately decided to sit back and watch it all unfold, knowing that avoiding its demise was pretty much inevitable, because he already tried that. Number 1. Prestige. When it comes to Jean Grey and Cyclops, they really have more alternate or future kids than they do main continuity ones. Rachel Summers, aka Prestige, being no exception here. She hails from the alternate dystopian future belonging to Earth 811, where she is the daughter of her own reality's version of Jean and Scott. Although oddly enough, on Earth 616, she does pretty much also think of the main continuity versions of her parents as her true parents as well, which I guess in a way they sort of are, it's just they didn't end up going down the path that leads to Earth 811. Earth 811 is the Days of Future Past reality to give you an idea of just how dystopian we're talking about here. Rachel is even more powerful than her brother from a different reality, Cable. She also has been a host for the Phoenix Force and has better control and use of her abilities and powers. She also doesn't have the techno-organic virus distracting her and eating away at some of her power, meaning that she operates almost always at full power levels, which is pretty intense because Rachel's really powerful. Also, I dare everyone to go back and now count how many times I said dystopian future in this video. I feel like I said that a lot. Number 10. The Question. In the Prime Earth continuity, the Question, or a version of the Question, is revealed to be one of the oldest beings in the world of DC. This is revealed after we learn that the Question was one of the criminals in essence that the Circle of Eternity, located at the Rock of Eternity, chose to punish for their crimes against humanity. This group of beings who were punished were known as the Trinity of Sin. The Question would go on to become a hero following this. This version of the Question is largely a mysterious figure who has not appeared as much, probably because the original version of the character, Vic Sage, and his predecessor, Renee Montoya, ended up both returning to the comics recently. What we do know is that the Question had his memory erased from history and from himself, with even his face being left completely featureless, so he could never remember who he was. This was part of his punishment, but also done to guarantee that the Question would not be able to rise up once more as he had threatened to do originally, since he would no longer be able to remember what exactly he had done and why in the first place. So how can he return if he doesn't even know, why he was doing it in the first place? And apparently, we may never get to know any of this either, unless somebody returns to tell the rest of this version of the Question's tale. Number 9. The Eternals. The Eternals are simply a group of heroes most people don't often think of, which is why I'm including them here. Despite them coming to the MCU, I would still say there are tons out there who have fallen off the MCU bandwagon recently and kind of just weren't particularly compelled to watch this film. So there are still a lot who do not know about the Eternals, which is unfortunate. This is a huge shame, I think, because the Eternals are really a cool group of heroes who have existed for millennia. Initially, their origin was that they were prehistoric humans who were basically modified by celestial tech, turned into their own race of beings. Later on, we'd get an additional bit of information on their origin in terms of kind of how they worked, how they operated, with them being resurrected by the Great Machine on the regular anytime they died. That's how they were eternal, almost being like kind of androids with a soul in a sense at one point. The Great Machine is actually also Earth, which is both a big blue ball that everyone lives on and, at its core, an actual machine, a resurrection machine, in part. Its survival is intrinsic to the survival of Earth and all life forms living on it, and it was, up until recently, also tied to the Eternals, meaning that for Earth to continue, the Eternals would also have to continue to be called into existence. The Eternals, being ancient heroes, were initially the enemies of the Deviants, who were also created by the Celestials. They defended Earth against the Dark Celestials, or they tried to, and have also become ingrained in human mythology, with them being the real-world heroes from ancient epics and folklore. Hawkgirl. While Hawkman recently appeared in Black Adam in the DCEU, which has been rebranded with their highly anticipated reset impending as simply the DCU, Hawkman isn't the only hero out there who is ancient among the Justice Society. And no, I'm not talking about Dr. Fate, who also is pretty old. In fact, many people probably didn't even know that Hawkman was really even ancient per se. He doesn't look old, that's for sure, but he is, in fact, not in body, but in soul. Hawkman is the reincarnated soul of ancient Egyptian Prince Khufu Qatar. Carter Hall is only the latest in a line of incarnations of the prince in the comics, and his love, Sheara, was also reincarnated as well throughout the years, becoming known as the hero Hawkgirl and also as Hawkwoman. Later, this origin would be retconned, tweaked somewhat, so they'd actually be even older than ancient Egypt, instead becoming ancient aliens from the planet Thanagar, who simply came to Earth. Their original souls in this version of the tale were each believed to belong to Shra and Qatar the Deathbringer, who were both cursed to be reincarnated alongside each other throughout eternity. Number 7. Gaia. Gaia is someone that we perhaps don't think of as being an ancient superhero because, well, we just don't really think of Gaia that much. She hails from Marvel Comics and is the goddess of Earth. Gaia is seen as one of the oldest gods that Marvel has to offer us, being one of their elder gods. In fact, Gaia is kind of one of the only elder gods who could be seen as heroic or good, at least one of I would say she's up there, considering she is one of the few who managed to avoid becoming a demon. She also actively sought out the demiurge in order to produce offspring that would help to rid the universe of the other elder gods who had been corrupted after they became demonic, giving birth to Atum, who then became the Demigorge, the God Eater. She's probably also one of the oldest heroes mentioned on this list at all, so there's also that. Number 6. Nubia. Nubia is possibly even older than most other Amazons, who are generally known for being old and immortal just standardly. In Infinite Frontier, her story was retconned so that she was no longer a woman held and mistreated against her will for a long time, but a princess reborn in the Well of Souls. Nubia was born from the Well of Souls, reincarnated, around the same time that Princess Diana was born, and the two grew up often being thought of as sisters. And if you're wondering why I was mentioning that she might be older than some of the other Amazons, that's just because she's reincarnated. So although Nubia in her own form is around the same age as Diana, she also got an old soul, you know what I mean? She would spend many years as the guardian of Doom's doorway, and would act as a loyal supporter to Queen Hippolyta, even when it seemed that she had betrayed her. In fact, Nubia's loyalty to the Amazons in the current continuity has not failed, and she even recently was chosen to be the new queen of the Amazons. And we're not just talking about the Amazons of Themyscira either, but in fact all known Amazons in existence, as there are actually multiple Amazonian tribes in existence throughout the world. Number 5. Lady Phoenix. Well, I did think that Phoenix was a little too on the nose for my part 1 of this list. There were some who actually requested her in the comments, so fair enough. Some people want to know more about her. And since she was featured in our thumbnail / cover photo for that first part of our list, I felt for all you loyal nerds who came to this part 2, I should oblige you and tell you more about Lady Phoenix. Who is the woman we featured on that thumb? She is also a member of the 1 million BCE Avengers, also nicknamed the Stone Age or Prehistoric Avengers. Before she was the host of the Phoenix, she was simply known as Firehair, named after her bright red hair, which left her abandoned by her parents only shortly after she was born into the world. Anyone who their tribe deemed basically different in some way was sacrificed in this manner. This was also to be the fate of Firehair, but she was rescued by wolves, so she ended up being okay. She grew up among her pack, but eventually joined up with the Tribe Without Fear, a group of prehistoric mutants. Her own mutant powers would manifest, and she would eventually lose her tribe and become bonded to the Phoenix Force. Ultimately resisting its dark temptations, she would go on to become one of the founding members of the Stone Age Avengers alongside Odin. While it was suggested that Lady Phoenix was actually the true mother of Thor, we learned in Avengers 1 million BC issue number 1 from 2022 that her relationship ended with Odin before Thor was born, with Gaia being Thor's natural mother as we knew before, Freya being Thor's adoptive mother, and Lady Phoenix being dubbed kinda like his bonus mother, after she helped Gaia give birth to Thor and saved him from a premature death. And then Gaia was like, you can be mother to Thor too. So we got that all figured out. Sorry what I said on part 1, it's not exactly true. Not his mother, well she is his mother, but she's not his only mother. He's got a lot of mothers. Number 4. Artemis. Artemis was also once Wonder Woman, don't you know? Back in the New Earth continuity. She herself is an Amazon, and despite her youthful appearance, like most Amazons, she's pretty old. In fact, in the New Earth continuity, she was also granted eternal youth as the result of a spell that Circe had cast upon her. In the Prime Earth continuity, she is just straight up immortal. She hails from the Bana Migdal, which is a splinter group of Amazons all their own. Like I said, there are many different tribes. Princess Diana of Themyscira and Artemis have often been presented as rivals in the comics, with Artemis often being jealous of Wonder Woman and kind of striving to prove herself superior to Diana. But despite this, she is ultimately a force for good and a hero, though her warrior's heart might be a little harder in comparison maybe to Diana's when it comes to her heroic approach. Number 3. Red Sonja. Red Sonja is an interesting one to think of as old, considering how she is often portrayed in the comics, but like Conan, who I touched on during the part 1 of this list, Sonja herself is also ancient in the sense that she hails from the past, the Hyborian Age. She was a creation of Robert E. Howard's, who initially existed within Marvel, but eventually ended up being moved over to Dynamite when it comes to who owns the right to this fiery, fierce warrior character. The Hyborian Age was actually a pastime in Marvel history, at least that is what we're led to believe based on the fact that both she and Conan hail from the reality of Earth 616. Red Sonja set out on her path to become a fierce fighter at a young young age, after she was left orphaned when her family were killed and her people were attacked by a group of mercenaries. Red Sonja hails from western Hyrcania and often fights to help those who cannot help themselves, even sometimes training those she comes across so that they might actually act as a hero in their own story. She is sometimes also a sword for hire, but generally only takes jobs that kind of fit with her own particular moral code. And she does have a moral code, even though she's a mercenary a lot of the times. Number 2. Shazam. Wait. Billy Batson is super old? No, we aren't talking about Shazam. Not that Shazam. Not the Shazam formerly known as Captain Marvel. We're talking about the Wizard, who gave Billy Batson his powers and who has also been known by the name of Shazam. Initially in the Prime Earth continuity, we were led to believe that the Wizard was simply someone who bestowed powers on Billy, but we'd later learned that he was actually one of the old gods Shazam would actually get his powers from. This truth of the Wizard's, aka Mama Roggins, aka Shazam's origin would be revealed after Billy Batson was left depowered following the action of Grail, Darkseid's daughter, who basically cut off his access to his powers by untethering the old gods from his magic lightning. While not a direct superhero, the Wizard is a powerful force of good who was even able to help repower Billy from the afterworld in spirit form, finding basically new gods for him to be empowered by. Number 1. Eternal Warrior. Marvel and DC are not the only publishers who have ancient heroes. Even Dynamite, now owning Red Sonja, is not the only publisher with ancient superheroes by any stretch. A lot of people have ancient superheroes. In fact, one publisher that was suggested in the comments that has tons of ancient superheroes is Valiant Comics, so I'm happy to be talking to you about that. Great suggestion. This particular hero from Valiant that we're talking about is Gilad Anipada. Gilad was one of 4 siblings granted immortality. He has used this extended time over his life to train up, becoming a master in many different areas of combat. He acts as a hero in the comics, being tasked with defending the Geomancer of any given generation. Geomancers were kind of born in a line, and they're magical heroes in their own right who were chosen to act on behalf of the Earth as the planet's defender, and who are able to communicate with nature and the Earth. And the Eternal Warrior basically just acts as like their guardian, so heroes protecting heroes.
Kicking off the list at number 10, the Maestro. The Maestro first appeared in Hulk Future Imperfect. Now this is a crazy version of the Hulk, of course from an alternate future, 100 or so years later. Now this is after the world has fallen apart due to a nuclear war. Nearly every superhero had been killed off at this point. It was a grim future, that's for sure. Now radiation was killing off average Joes like us, but for the Hulk, I mean, he just absorbed all of this. He got stronger, and dare I say it, he got smarter. The only way to defeat this older, now bearded Hulk was to go back in time using Doom's time machine and using that first gamma explosion to wipe him off the map so he never existed. I hope we can see this guy in the MCU. He can connect with astral beings, so maybe Strange will have him in some alternate reality in the next Doctor Strange sequel. Fingers crossed, I'm hoping.
In at 9, Gore. Gore, also known as Gore the God Butcher, was born on a planet with no name. Almost every day was spent starving with no food. He was taught to trust in the gods, but they never answered his prayers. At an early age, his mother and father died, leaving Gore to fend for himself, which sucks even if you aren't on the brink of starvation. Years later, he married and fathered some children. However, most of them died. Man, this guy has a great life. Gore's pregnant spouse Aura was also killed during an earthquake, and one by one his children started dying off until he was left with his one son Agar. He lost faith that the gods he was taught to trust even existed, but when he learned that they did in fact exist, he sought to punish them for not saving his family despite his desperate pleas. Which I guess is an understandable reaction, but if I found out gods like Thor, Odin, and Zeus and Hades actually existed, I wouldn't think that they could hear my prayers. Cause even if they're gods, they're still in a way people, right? Plus, a god killer, it's very forward thinking.
Number 8, Ravonna. AKA Terminatrix. Okay, Ravonna Renslayer made her first appearance in Marvel Comics with Avengers issue 23. She was the daughter of King Kirilius, a ruler in the 40th century. It was the last civilization that wasn't conquered by Kang at this point, but Kang spared them because he caught feelings for Ravonna. Can't help it, you gotta follow the heart. She refused to share the love because he wasn't royalty, but he was determined to win her over. He was so determined that he summoned the Avengers to that timeline just to fight them and embarrass them, and then in turn impress her. Now it worked because in the following issue, when everybody's making a run for it, she can't leave him. Kang knows even this is a bad idea, but love is love, baby. You gotta do what you gotta do. So if he marries Ravonna, Baltag will go against him with Kang's troops, and Baltag did do this. And when he attacked Kang, Ravonna jumped in the way using her last breath to tell Kang she indeed loves him. Cut to Avengers issue 267, Prime Kang was able to go back in time and save her. He altered reality so another version of him died instead of Ravonna. How sweet / confusing. Ravonna's awesome. We get to see her in Loki, and I'm really hoping we get her alternate side as well, the Terminatrix. She's much more of a big deal than the show has revealed yet. She once disguised herself as Nebula in order to infiltrate the Council of Cross-Time Kangs. She's kind of a big deal.
And it's 7 Kron Stone. Kron Stone is actually the son of Tyler Stone, and the older half-brother of Miguel O'Hara, Spider-Man 2099, as revealed later on in his series. Kron became a violent person after years of suffering not at the hands of his father, but rather an android housekeeper. Yeah, this dude thought their robot maid was so bad that he went nuts and ended up killing Punisher 2099's family, the Gallows family. This was also before gaining superpowers, since after nearly getting killed by Jake Gallows, the Punisher of 2099, Kron fell into a sewer and floated into this strange black ball. This black ball was somehow the mutated form of the Venom symbiote that had survived without a host for all this time, I guess. The symbiote bonded with Kron and they became Venom 2099. This new version of Venom had also gained acidic blood and saliva, so that's a pretty gnarly power right there. So safe to say Venom 2099 is a pretty futuristic version of the symbiote, especially if you look at him. Hot damn.
Number 6. Chronarch. Not to be confused with the 64th century ruler from DC Comics, Chronarch was once a regular man, and he first appeared in Defenders Volume 2, Issue 12. He was a janitor working for a research group who, of course, spilled something that changed his life forever. He spilled something on the Chronoscepter, so in turn it opened up this time vortex, and out came, you guessed it, dinosaurs. Yeah, dinosaurs that he could control. So yeah, I had to include this villain. This guy is nuts. The Chronarch then made a cool suit of armor, of course, to fit the whole theme. And then he set up a camp in an abandoned theme park and ran operations until the Defenders showed up to save the day. Now, I'm upset here because the Defenders sent the dinosaurs back to their time, their doomed timeline, which we all know, instead of just opening a Jurassic Park. Come on guys, think, profit. Come on, you're Marvel, you're Disney, you like money, do this.
Halfway through into number 5, Technarchy. We all love a good alien invader storyline. They always give us ideas of what to do and what not to do if we ever end up in the same situation making first contact. However, in Marvel's 2099 series, one race of aliens known as the Technarchy is not only a badass name, but the absolute pure definition of demonic cyberpunk, and I think that at this point you can see why. This race of aliens are cybernetic, shape-shifting, and giant techno-organic entities that love violence as all higher life forms do. They were created by the Phalanx, another alien race, but since they love violence, they also hate their creators just for the sake of it. It's so bad in fact that they don't even consider them their creators, and rather just a sucky version of their own species. Yeah, these aliens are racist. And they can also infect organic beings with a techno-organic virus that turns organic matter into technology that I'm guessing they then consume. This is actually insane, but they're my new favorite alien race.
Number 4. Tsar. Spider-Man and Wolverine, the Dream Team, involved in a pretty intense storyline. The 2010 6-parter written by Jason Aaron begins with the Orb robbing a bank, which I gotta say would be the weirdest and scariest deposit ever. Spider-Man and Wolverine are on the scene and things seem manageable at first, but when a bag of stolen glowing diamonds hits the ground, the daring duo are transported 60 million years back in time. Wolverine knows after taking one breath that this is not Savage Land. Now they're hanging out and an asteroid is heading for Earth. So much later, when Peter has now grown a beard in this altered timeline, Wolverine is also leading the group, the Small Folk. The diamonds activate again, and this time they're shot into the future. What is going on? Okay, so in issue 2, the Orb asked Peter about the diamonds. These diamonds belong to the Tsar. He had them attached to his teeth, real fashionable, real gangster-like. He also has a bat with those diamonds embedded in them. So he has arguably the most dangerous weapon I've ever seen. A bat with time-traveling diamonds sticking out of them. Okay, RIP. His sidekick, Big Murder, was also pretty fashionable. He rocks the Kanye glasses while commuting through the cosmos. It's a pretty good duo. I would never want to fight these guys in any reality, especially not the future.
Getting close to the end into number 3, Electro 2099. You want futuristic villains? One look at Electro 2099 and you'll be ruining your pants in more ways than one. Electro 2099's origin is the most future thing you could get, with his original form being a robot construction worker. But this robot's creators became frustrated and unsatisfied with his work, so they sent him to a robot torture experimenter. Yeah, this is starting to sound an awful lot like my trigger, and I don't like that. But the torture this android went through, however, broke his obedience chip, and as such, the laws of robotics went out the window. This android then gained sentience and the ability to harness and siphon electrical energy, turning him into the new Electro. He also ended up joining the 2099 version of the Sinister Six. This is absolutely ridiculous to me. Like, why would you send a robot who isn't doing their job properly to be tortured? Why would you just not fix their coding or whatever it is in 2099? This is why AI is a bad idea. I'm telling you. However, he does look badass.
Number 2, Ultron. Making his first appearance in Avengers issue 54, Ultron in the comics was originally made by Dr. Hank Pym, but of course he became sentient and turned into a big brass bully. Ultron in the MCU wasn't nearly as cool as the comics, specifically the Age of Ultron storyline from 2013. The story opens up with the world gone dark. Spider-Man is kidnapped by a gang, Hawkeye performs a daring rescue, and then the two then meet up with the rest of the Avengers, or rather, the remaining Avengers ever. That's it. This future is dark and riddled with Ultron drones, population is running real low, it's a stressful time. Ultron is ahead of the game here. Literally, he uses vision as a conduit to communicate with the past. He resides in the future comfortably and remains a ruler. This is one of my all-time favorite comics. The team goes back in time to talk to Pym, but Logan has other messy intentions. It's a ride. You must check it out.
Finally, in at number 1, Kang the Conqueror. You knew it was gonna happen. Nathaniel Richards was born in the 30th century of Earth 6311, a reality where humanity never went into the Dark Ages. After centuries of advancement in warfare, peace was brought to the land by a time traveler from Earth 616 named Nathaniel Richards. Because Richards brought peace to this war-torn future, he was known as a legend. The Nathaniel Richards born to this reality, though, is said to be a distant descendant of Reed Richards, although other records also indicate that he may be a descendant of the Latvian monarch known as Dr. Doom. Or maybe some of the shippers are right after all. At the age of 16, intervention from his future self as Kang the Conqueror resulted in a young Nathaniel trying to prevent his eventual transformation into Kang the Conqueror, briefly becoming the young hero known as Iron Lad. The kid also briefly had a stint as a supervillain known as Kid Immortus. Basically, there are infinite versions of this character and all of them seem to have some form of beef. This is supposed to be the next main villain of the MCU apparently, and hot damn, is this about to get crazy, as I'm sure you can already tell.
Number 10, the Immortal. With a name like the Immortal, you bet your socks this guy has been around for a hot minute. Due to an accident that happened approximately 3,000 years ago, the man who became the Immortal was exposed to an unknown anomaly that gave him superhuman abilities that put him almost on par with Viltrumites, making him one of the 3 known beings in the universe that can make that claim. But outside of his incredible strength, speed, durability, stamina, and flight powers, the Immortal is, you guessed it, immortal. Able to regenerate at an insanely fast rate, regrowing limbs and organs, not needing food, water, or oxygen to survive, and being immune to all poisons, toxins, venoms, viruses, bacteria, parasites, pathogens, and allergens. However, funnily enough, there is a way to, quote, kill him. If the Immortal's head is separated from his torso, it needs to be manually reattached for his healing factor to activate. But despite that, even when they aren't attached, he still remains perfectly preserved until the reattachment happens. He's been around for so long that he's been a knight possibly under King Arthur as Lancelot, an explorer under or possibly as Christopher Columbus in the Spanish Armada. He fought in the American Revolution, became president of the United States by taking the alias of this guy Abraham Lincoln you might have heard of, and he fought as a soldier in the First World War. In the 1930s is when he officially became a superhero and more recently became a member of the Guardians of the Globe.
Number 9, The Darkness. The story featuring this host of the Darkness is so vicious and bloody, but also just so raw and emotional. I love it personally. While many think of a Jackie Estacado when they think of the Darkness, he is not the only host the Darkness entity has ever had, which honestly, if you're familiar with the story of Jackie, you'd probably also kind of know that because, you know, it gets passed down. In fact, there were many who came before Jackie. Case in point, Estacado, the Darkness host who is a leader of a Visigoth tribe during the final days of the ancient Roman Empire, circa 410 BC. After its downfall had really already begun, and some would say even kind of already concluded, I guess, Estacado is a known rebel against the Roman Empire and a powerful one at that, wielding the Darkness in his fight against the last standing Roman legions. He ends up going going head to head with Legatus and his Legion after already dying and being resurrected by the darkness twice. While he offers Legatus a chance to surrender, Legatus knows he is doomed either way since the Roman Empire is coming to an end, and so chooses not to back down as he doesn't really see surrendering as a real option given the punishment for doing so, were they even able to make it back home at this point. As such, Legatus's Legion falls and Estacado makes plans to march with his tribe to Rome.
Number 8. Ogon Bat. Okay, Ogon Bat is a unique and cool character in his own right, but he was also one of the world's first superheroes ever, even technically coming before Superman. Originating from Japan as the god of justice and protector of the weak, his origin is that he was originally an Atlantean who was sent forward in time 10,000 years to defend the modern world from evil. He wields a scepter that fires bolts of energy, causes mini earthquakes, and slices through steel. He himself was immortal, could fly, breathe underwater, had X-ray vision, and possessed superhuman strength, speed, and invulnerability to bullets and lasers. He was summoned by a little girl who would call on him, causing a sparkle to appear around, which then turned into a bat and then turned into the hero when it found its enemy. It's very weird, but we just roll with it. While he initially started as a comic, he also has a TV show that appeared in several different countries outside of Japan, and I think he looks really cool. So, yeah.
Number 7. Cosmic Ghost Rider. Cosmic Ghost Rider is an interesting one. While I initially thought of the prehistoric Ghost Rider Ghost when it came to old Ghost Riders, I realized that despite being from an alternate future, Cosmic Ghost Rider is also ancient. But you know, future ancient. Cosmic Ghost Rider is the spirit of Frank Castle, who ends up becoming the spirit of vengeance after he is killed during Thanos' invasion of Earth. In this version of the story, Thanos succeeds in basically destroying Earth, and by the time Frank returns as Ghost Rider to the planet's surface, it's kinda too late for him to save his friends. He ends up alone on the planet, and after years and years of solitude with no one left to avenge, becomes, well, insane, as I think pretty much almost anyone would. Despite eventually becoming Thanos' herald, CGR is really doing his best to be a good guy. He only ever really even joined up with Thanos because, you know, well, there was no one left and he didn't want to be alone. Before even joining up with Thanos, Cosmic Ghost Rider did attempt to get his revenge on the Mad Titan, teaming up with Galactus, but even Galactus fell in this fight against this alternate King Thanos.
Number 6. Exodus. Grand Duke Benny du Paris was a 12th century nobleman from medieval France. Does that count as ancient? I don't know, anyone who was around then, so I'm taking it and just running with it, okay? Cool. What you gonna do about it? Nothing, because I'm just an image on your screen. As an adult, Bene was a crusader for the Knights Templar sent to Jerusalem during the Crusades, and he even became best friends with Eobar Garrington, the Black Knight of that era. The two had set out on a quest to find the Tower of Power, when his abilities manifested after an encounter with the Phoenix Force, which were then improved further thanks to the mutant apocalypse. But thanks to Big Blue, Exodus was trapped in a tomb until the modern day when he was awoken by Magneto and joined his cause. Exodus is one of the most powerful psionic mutants in existence, with such a pristine use of telekinesis and telepathy that he can even alter electrons and molecules. His power is so strong that Marvel even had to debuff him by making his powers dependent on his or others' level of faith in this mutant, although he still regularly kicks some serious butt.
Number 5. The Old Guard. Can we call the Old Guard heroes? I'm not really 100% sure on that. They're ancient warriors who've been many things over the years. Not all the things they've done were necessarily good, but I would say for the most part, they've tried to stay on the side of good, so I think I'm gonna count them for this list. And that's definitely where they are at when it comes to where we meet them in the modern day. Or at least, you know, the direction they're headed towards, I would say. Initially, the Old Guard were a group of immortal mercenaries led by their oldest member, Andy, aka Andromaca of Scythia, who is thousands of years old. It is in their welcoming of a new member that we get to see some of the good in them, despite them being essentially expensive, deadly, and nearly indestructible guns for hire. Their immortality is as much a mystery to them as it is to readers of the series, seemingly happening to each member miraculously and really without explanation. One minute they were alive, the next dead, and then inexplicably right back to living. In 2020, the Old Guard comics got their first film adaptation through Netflix. As with most Greg Rucka creations, the premise and his approach had me hooked, pretty much.
Number 4. Medieval Spawn. Okay, I'm gonna come right out and say this, I know nothing about Spawn. I did not watch the show, I never read the comics, I really have no right to be standing here in front of you talking about him, but I'm doing it anyways. Don't worry, I'm not actually talking about the Spawn. I'm going to be talking about medieval Spawn. Naturally, medieval Spawn was not only a hell spawn, but also a knight living in 16th century England. And if you think about it, knights were almost like medieval superheroes, with tales and stories all their own. Sir John of York fought during a civil war in England, but was released from his service to Henry II after he and 3 others mistook the king's anger for orders and went and took the life of the Archbishop of Canterbury. Now, once he passed at the hands of his king's bodyguards, he was sent to hell for his crimes, where he made a deal with Malbolgia and returned as a hellspawn. He then went around England committing good deeds in the hopes of redeeming himself, but he continues to survive after being basically bonded to his armor and now possessing anyone who chooses to don his helmet. And I need to start reading Spawn. Right now.
Number 3, Witchblade. While most people think of Sarah Pizzini when they think of the Witchblade, Sarah was not the only one to wield the blade, and was, in fact, by far the first. One of the oldest Witchblade wielders was actually Samantha. Samantha hails from ancient Roman times, though she herself is not Roman, but instead was a native of an old Celtic town that they overtook named Cecilia. At least I think its name was Cecilia. There's also a character in the story with her that's named Cecilia, so that's a little confusing, but I'm pretty sure I'm right about that. Samantha was enslaved, but would eventually escape and end up running into druids out in the countryside, who believed she was the one who would be destined to save the other Celts from the Romans. She was given the Witchblade and would set out on a mission to destroy all Romans. While a hero ultimately, I would say, at least of her own story, Samantha's tale and alignment is pretty complex, which is often what makes Witchblade hosts like her so interesting.
Number 2, Martian Manhunter. You know, I didn't actually know how old Martian Manhunter is. I knew that he was the last of his race of Martians, and I know that he is extremely powerful and should never be slept on. And I know that he speaks with the resolve and intelligence of someone who has seen some serious shiznit. But when I found out that according to DC, he is in the ballpark of around or over 220 million years old, I gotta say, I took a moment to just digest that. John Johns, or John Jones if you want to be rude and go by his human name, arrived on Earth after he was pulled there by a teleportation beam during an experiment conducted by Dr. Saul Erdel, who brought him through space and time and then passed away from the shock of actually finding a Martian. This is because John's race was practically wiped out a long time ago, leaving him completely alone and isolated. But now on Earth, with no one to tell him what the hell was going on, he eventually used his shapeshifting abilities to become a detective operating in Middletown, America. For a long time, he mainly operated from the safety of his human persona before he eventually exposed himself to the world and became a founding member of the Justice League, and also one of its most powerful members. Just saying.
Number 1, Ghost Rider. Way before Johnny Blaze was even ever born, there was Ghost. Ghost is the original Ghost Rider, or at least believed to be the original Ghost Rider, the initial spirit of vengeance. Retroactively anyways, as he made his first comic book appearance after Johnny Blaze historically, appearing in Marvel Legacy issue number 1 from 2017. So obviously that's pretty recent, but you know, canonically one of the first. Ghost became the first Ghost Rider during the prehistoric era and did so in order to defeat the mysterious Wendigo, who took over his pack, becoming their leader, only to eat the pack members save for Ghost. Ghost would stumble upon a snake and speak its real name in order to become Ghost Rider, the spirit of vengeance. He also has a cool mammoth, or he had a cool mammoth, and then he got another mammoth, and I think that mammoth's gone too, but he likes mammoths. He would go on to join up with the Avengers of 1 million BC.
Kicking off the list at number 10. Booster Gold. Born in the 25th century Gotham City, Michael Carter was born a twin alongside his sister Michelle. Their mother was loving, but their father left them on their 4th birthday. What a sad birthday that is. He left to gamble his life away, and as a result, Michael and his family have to live with this massive debt. Michael was nicknamed Booster in college because he was killing it in football. He was aiming for the big leagues. Now his mother got sick, so Michael took a page out of his father's book and made bets to make bank. He purposely threw games to afford treatments for his mother, but after she was cured, Michael was then called out and then later put in jail. Once he was released, he got a security job at the Metropolis Space Museum, where he admired photos of superheroes from the past, from the 20th century. So he stole some artifacts from around the museum, used Rip Hunter's time machine, and shot back to the 20th century, saving the life of Ronald Reagan. His tech is pretty sweet. I mean, he stole a Legion flight ring, he stole an advanced combat suit, gauntlets. Honestly, it's the visor for me. That's what makes it, personally. Number 9. Cable. First appearing in Uncanny X-Men issue 201, Cable was the newborn Nathaniel Summers. His story is pretty wild and also kind of confusing. His birth was planned by Mr. Sinister. Now he created Madeline Pryor, which was a clone of Jean Grey. He did this so Scott Summers would fall for her and then in turn give birth to the most powerful mutant ever. Apocalypse eventually figured this new kid could be the perfect upgrade as well, so he had the child kidnapped and then infected with a techno-organic virus. That's when X-Factor's AI, Ship, merged with Nathaniel. It was trying to slow the virus down, but after Apocalypse lost to X-Factor, Clan Ascani offered to save the child by taking him to the alternate future of Earth 4935. Now his telekinetic powers kept him safe from the techno-organic virus, but in the future he also gained access to amazing tech, including a teleportation device from Forge. So he's a jacked warrior and strategist with a 21st century and 39th century weapon haul. Hell yeah, we love him. Josh Brolin played him in the MCU, and honestly, he should come over with Deadpool. He's too good. I don't care if he was Thanos. We'll ignore it. And before we continue on with this future list, if you want to go ahead and give us a thumbs up, that would be great. It really helps our channel out so much. You guys are the best. Thank you so much, nerds. Now let's get right back to the list. Number 8, Iron Lad. Making his first appearance in Young Avengers back in 2005, the comic begins with these, well, Young Avengers saving the day. Thor Jr. had lightning powers, Iron Kid's armor was more advanced than Iron Man's, Teen Hulk was polite, odd, and Lieutenant America was helpful yet bossy. Looking good so far. Now these kids aren't with the Avengers, therefore they have to be put in check. You can't have these kids risking their lives. That's a no-go for Cap. Now if they're mutants, they'll refer them to Xavier's school, but either way, somebody's parents are getting a talking to. So the Young Avengers bust into a hostage situation at a wedding, and Iron Lad uses magnetism to take away their guns, while the rest of the team uses, well, brute force. They barely escape, but Iron Lad keeps warning the team about Kang. They'll need all the help they can get once Kang finds them, okay? Iron Lad eventually cross paths with the Avengers, and that's when he explains his origin. His armor is neurokinetic. Tony thinks it's advanced by 10 years, but Iron Lad corrects him by saying it's actually thousands of years ahead of its time. And that he's also in fact Kang from the 30th century. Number 7, Orin. Moving over to the Flashpoint timeline, which I'll explain a little bit later, Emperor Aquaman was now leading Atlantis headfirst into a war with Wonder Woman, and it all started when Barry Allen went back in time. So this history was now different. So Aquaman was raised in Atlantis this time around, rather than learning the ways from his human father. So when he saved Wonder Woman from a sea creature, the two ended up falling in love. Now I know so far this sounds pretty great, but trust me, it gets worse. Atlantis and Themyscira coming together in holy matrimony started off great, but the thing is, when Wonder Woman's mother was killed on their wedding day, the marriage was then called off, and instead of an open bar, they had an open war. Orin tried to sink Themyscira, but in doing so, he sank the majority of Western Europe as well, drowning about 60 million innocents. Sometimes the future sucks. Number 6, Maestro. The Incredible Hulk future and perfect storyline. Let's talk about it. So as the title suggests, the future is not so bright, especially with our last point too. Sometimes things go south. There are no flying cars, sometimes there's no microchips in the brain. It's actually more like WALL-E, sadly, this time around. In The Incredible Hulk Volume 2, Issue 401, we're seeing the Incredible Hulk 100 years in the future, right after a nuclear war just wiped out everybody and everything on the planet. All the while, Banner had been absorbing this nuclear radiation and getting smarter, stronger, and more handsome, I guess. He became even more unstoppable as the Maestro and also a tad evil. He took out the remaining heroes of Earth, grew his beard out all sexy like, and then literally ruled the planet. His trophy room was also quite impressive. He had Cap's shield, Doctor Strange's cloak, and Wolverine's entire skeleton. It takes a time-traveling Rick Jones and a much more sane version of the Hulk to trick Maestro into returning back in time to the Gamma Bomb experiment from day 1 in order to eliminate him. If the only way to stop a guy is by going back in time, I mean, that's pretty intimidating. You definitely make this list. Number 5, Savior. First appearing in the Teen Titans Legion Special Issue 1, this version of Tim Drake comes from a possible alternate future where he was the new Batman. Although it was something he saw as a shadow cast over Bruce, something he swore he would never become. Now this timeline happened when the Teen Titans traveled to the 31st century to help the Legion of Superheroes take on the Fatal 500. Now on the cosmic commute back to their own timeline, they accidentally arrived 10 10 years into their future. And no, Avatar 2 is still not out. But they did meet older versions of themselves, but this time around they were much more violent in how they prevented crime. Now during those lost 10 years, the world experienced this crisis that resulted in Bruce Wayne being killed by Batwoman right after he reactivated Brother Eye. So Tim got a promotion. Now, I guess. The world got even darker, however, because the nation was split into two factions, East and West. Now with Tim and his co-workers developing a zero-tolerance approach towards criminals. By using hypertime, the older Tim went back in time to prevent this catastrophe, but he went back to prevent Superboy Jonathan Kent from losing control of his powers and subsequently taking the lives of millions. So Tim goes back as Savior to take out the young Jonathan Kent. I like the name Savior, it kinda sounds cool. Also, always take up that Batman mantle. Never passing that. Number 4. Injustice Superman. This comic run began back in 2013, Injustice Gods Among Us, issue 1. Brought to us from the minds of Tom Taylor and Jeremy Rapak, this time we get a dark alternate reality where Lois Lane was kidnapped by the Joker. So Superman goes on this hunt with the help of Justice League and he just tears apart ships. He's searching frantically for Lois, but readers quickly learn in issue 4 that it will only get worse. Lois doesn't survive and this causes Superman to go insane. Because he felt responsible, he couldn't even stick around on the planet. He gave the body to Wonder Woman and then immediately flew away. Green Lantern tried to talk to him a bit, but he wouldn't stop to listen. He had something better on his mind, and that was revenge. Batman's face shares the same expression as readers here, but it's interesting because Superman tells Batman that he himself learned the idea of enforcing peace through fear from Batman. That's a pretty valid point, no one can really argue that, I'll admit. Number 3, Bishop. The classic time travel stressful circle. Lucas is from a time where most of the mutant population is depowered by the Scarlet Witch. Lucas Bishop was born in the 21st century of an alternate future, a much darker one where mutants were being hunted down by Sentinels, and the X-Men were pretty much wiped out at this point. If they weren't eliminated, they were then held at a camp, so it's bad on both ends. Bishop's parents were captured and held at a camp in New York, but when Bishop and his sister Shard were born, they were both branded with an M tattoo for mutant over their right eye. Eventually the Summers Rebellion was underway where humans and mutants came together to overthrow said Sentinels. But during this, Bishop's parents didn't make it. So at just age 7 he was forced to move to Manhattan, and that's where he met the Witness, who raised him and taught him how to be a skillful thief. He grew up later and joined the XSE, Xavier's security enforcers, where him and his sister excelled. He joined the X-Men after traveling back in time to the 20th century, and he has a bit of a hard time adjusting to these past norms. Omar Sy played him in Days of Future Past, and still today, it's one of my top 3 superhero movies. I love time travel stuff, more specifically, I love the X-Men. Go watch that movie. Number 2, Terry McGinnis. In the not so far future, Bruce Wayne has retired, but Project Cadmus director Amanda Waller was expecting this. She always believed that another Batman would be needed when that day came. So began Project Batman Beyond. A major key element was using Batman's blood samples left over from his fights and mixing it up with future nanotechnology. So now we have the DNA of Batman, but we just need a family to raise this kid. So Amanda found the McGinnis household with Warren and Mary a perfect match. I mean literally, their DNA was on point with that of Martha and Thomas Wayne. So one flu shot later, we have the proud new parents of Terry McGinnis, Bruce Wayne reborn. Amanda actually wanted to send an assassin to take out Warren and Mary just to make sure history repeats itself, but luckily she didn't go through with it. That would have been dark, that would have been really dark. Now in his high school years, Terry was running away from a street gang called the Jokers. He ended up on the grounds of Wayne Manor where an older Bruce Wayne came out and helped Terry defeat the gang. Now Bruce was older, not in the best condition, so Terry helped him back inside. But that's when Terry stumbled across the entrance to the Batcave. Pretty sweet. So when Warren eventually did get taken out, the corrupt CEO Derek Powers, new head of Wayne Powers, seemed to be behind it all. So Terry went back to Wayne Manor and was demanding more information. Eventually Terry returned, tied up Ace, stole a batsuit, and then handled Powers himself, which was quite the audition. And finally, number 1, The Flash. The fastest man alive. Okay, since the character's debut back in Showcase issue 4, back in the late 50s, The Flash has seen many villains and many more timelines. Amongst them was the Flashpoint timeline, which I mentioned earlier when talking about Emperor Aquaman. Flashpoint was a crossover miniseries by Jeff Johns and Andy Kubert, and it was the same event that led DC Comics into the New 52. It was a big deal. And it all happened when Barry Allen tried to run back in time to save his mother from biting the dust. But in doing so, he opened the door to this new reality where Superman was a lab rat, Thomas Wayne was a dark Batman, and Cyborg was the frontman.
Number 10. Avengers 1 million BC, Earth 616. Alright, look, I promise this is the only Earth 616 story I'm mentioning. But given the team and the story, how can I not? The The Avengers of 1 million BC came together in the prehistoric era to face Zagreb the Aspirant, basically a mad celestial. The team was made up of Odin Bor's son, wielding Mjolnir, the mutant Firehair, the avatar of the Phoenix Force, the sorcerer Agamotto, like the Eye of Agamotto, that guy, Fan Fei the Iron Fist, the first ever Black Panther of the Panther Tribe, a mammoth riding Ghost Rider, and Starbrand. They first appeared in Marvel Legacy #1 in 2017, and I'm not even going to explain the rest. Just go read it, please! Earth 76611, alternate history. In Fantastic Four Annual number 11 in 1976, Power Man knocked a vibranium cylinder into Mr. Fantastic's time platform, sending it back in time. The cylinder was split in two halves. The important to this topic half landed in occupied France in 1942 and created an alternate branching timeline, Earth 76611. In this alternate timeline, the socialist Germans used the vibranium to advance their war effort, successfully invading England in 1943 and even making it to Manhattan by 1944, taking over America by 1946. That's what half a cylinder of vibranium can do, apparently. The Fantastic Four realized what happened though, and through some confusing tomfoolery, they managed to prevent this timeline from replacing the Earth 616 timeline. Number 8. Earth 9591, Ruins. This alternate reality is going to be the most recent one, taking place in the 90s. The timing of this one doesn't factor so much into its story though, as the more relevant detail is that this is the universe where literally everything goes wrong. The entire Fantastic Four, except Ben Grimm, who was replaced by Victor Von Doom, died on their test flight. The X-Men are held in a prison in Texas where they are horribly disfigured to stop them from using their powers. Peter Parker's spider bite caused an infectious rash that mutated his entire body and caused his hair to fall out. Bruce Banner becomes a monstrous mass of tumors. The Avengers all died in a rebellion. The Silver Surfer went mad, wanting to know what it was like to breathe air again. Nick Fury became a cannibal. All sort of that really lovely stuff, you know? I would not read this story unless you're okay with being upset, but I would read this story because it's good and it's interesting. Number 7. Earth 6799, 1967 Spider-Man cartoon. Bouncing off that happy little lovely tale, we have Earth 6799, or just Earth 67, which is actually the Earth where the 1967 Spider-Man takes place. Because of that, this Earth technically first appeared in Spider-Man Episode 1 Season 1 on September 9th, 1967. Its comic book appearance first comes in Amazing Spider-Man Volume 3, number 9, as one of the many alternate Spider-Man featured in this story. He also shows up in Spider-Verse Team-Up issue number 2 when Miles Morales and Peter Parker come to this Earth to find Spider-Man and recruit him to the fight against the Inheritors. It's super entertaining. Number 6. Earth 84243, Conan in the modern day's 70s. Some people may not know this, but Conan the Barbarian is actually part of Marvel Comics. And while the era he lived in, the Hyborian Age, is part of the 616 continuity, the What If story on Earth 79213 isn't. Instead of being in the Hyborian Age though, our boy Conan gets stuck in the 20th century. After visiting the Hyborian trade city of Akbitana, he is captured by a wizard who specializes in time travel. And instead of escaping, he is transported to Manhattan on July 13th, 1977. What does he decide to do with himself? Well, after scaring off some punks and throwing an old lady in a trash can, he has a romantic encounter with a modern age lady, Danette, who shows him the Guggenheim Museum, which reminds him of an ancient citadel, and they go to investigate. Here, he fights off some muggers and then gets struck by magical lightning that transports him back through time to his Hyborian age. But at least he got to keep Danette's cap as a reminder of their romance. Number 5. Earth 15513, 1872. Technically, Earth 15513 is Battleworld, which is actually part of the modern Secret Wars story. The pocket dimension of the Valley of Doom is made of another Earth's version of the Wild West, mainly the town of Timely. Timely is run by its mayor, Wilson Fisk, and his enforcers, who ultimately answer to Governor Rocksong. Stephen Rogers is the sheriff in this here town, and he's a bitter but just man after the death of his deputy, Bucky Barnes. Anthony Stark is the town drunk, regretful of how his weapons were used in the Civil War. Natasha Romanoff is the widow of Bucky, with Bruce Banner being the doctor of the town. The new hero, Red Wolf, tries blowing up the Roxxon Dam, which almost results in his lynching, if it weren't for Sheriff Stephen Rogers, who saves him. Conflict blossoms when the agents of Roxxon, Bullseye, Grizzly, Elektra, and Dr. Octopus arrive in town and start running amok. Another story you have to read. I promise the steampunk-looking Iron Man will not disappoint you. Number 4, Earth 717, Captain America in the Civil War. The what if stories are so cool. In What If Captain America, Stephen Rogers actually fought in the American Civil War instead of World War II as General America, given powers from an ancient Native American eagle that also turned an evil racist Bucky Barnes into the White Skull, who became the leader of a white supremacist group. Because of General America's involvement in the Civil War, the Union won the war a year earlier than it normally would have. Abraham Lincoln survived his second term in office. He helped rebuild the South, suppressed the rise of a certain group of hooded racists, and prevented the Indian Wars from ever happening. He would go on to fight the White Skull and his new, deadlier hate group, eventually being succeeded by a line of Captain Americas who were his descendants. Number 3, Earth 90214, Marvel Noir. In this alternate version of Earth, superheroes debuted in the 1920s and 30s instead of their normal timing. This Earth 90214 brought us Marvel Noir, with subsequent noir versions of Punisher, Wolverine, Iron Man, Daredevil, Luke Cage, the X-Men, and most famously, Spider-Man. Each story is a fresh, unique, and awesome take on each character, seeing how superpowers in this world are pretty much non-existent except for a few characters. For example, Spider-Man was bitten by a spider, but instead of being based in science, his powers derived from a spider god. Or Wolverine didn't actually have claws, he just carries like brass knuckle blade things. Another example would be the X-Men, who are actually a group of sociopathic criminals, led by an Xavier who believed sociopathy was the future of the human species, which is just incredible. Number 2, Earth 811, Days of Future Past. Earth 811 is a future timeline where Sentinels rule over North America. After their creation, almost all mutants have been hunted and exterminated. The mutants that were not killed are kept in concentration camps. Even the heroes who aren't mutants have been exterminated. The Avengers, the Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, Daredevil, they're all gone. But hey, this is the future, not the past. Yeah, I'm getting there, okay? Rachel Summers, the daughter of Jean Grey and Scott Summers, uses her telepathic powers to send Kitty Pryde's mind back into her younger self's body. Specifically, Kitty's mind went all the way back to the Halloween of 1980, where she informed the X-Men of what their future could become, and they prevented the assassination of Robert Kelly. The story is a whole lot more complex than that, and is also one of the most prized Marvel stories, so give it a read! Number 1, Earth 311, Marvel 1602. Okay, Marvel 1602 is my absolute favorite Marvel alternate universe. Fun fact, it was the first Marvel writing escapade for superstar fantasy writer Neil Gaiman. The universe actually got its start in a different alternate reality, Earth 460, where Purple Man became president for life. Most heroes had been hunted down or had died from old age, but after Captain America is captured, he is banished away to Earth 616's 1599, shortly before Roanoke was formed, which inadvertently created Earth 311. For some reason, the presence of Captain America destabilized reality and began the emergence of heroes and villains into this world who are counterparts to many of the present-day heroes and villains of the Marvel Universe. Count Otto von Doom the Handsome, Witchbreed, which are mutants, Grand Inquisitor Enrique, which is Magneto, Carlos Xavier, which is Charles Xavier, Four from the Fantastic, Sir Nicholas Fury, Peter Parquois, David Banner. The story is so interesting, intertwining actual history with superpowered beings. I highly recommend you give it a read if you haven't already. Number 10, Bishop. Bishop comes from a terrible 22nd century that became a pretty horrible dystopia after an event called the Summer's Rebellion. Bishop wants nothing more than to prevent this future from happening, and that is basically his entire personality. To prevent his future apocalyptic future, he travels back to the present day to find the X-Men and to become Professor Xavier's bodyguard. Eventually, Bishop seems to think that his future is created thanks to the birth of Hope Summers, which leads to him becoming a bit of a villain, but also leads to a conflict with someone we will talk about in just one sec. Now, his time jumping abilities are granted by a cybernetic arm that he possesses, but his actual mutant ability is to absorb and redirect any kinetic energy that is used against him or that is released in his general vicinity. He's easily a favorite X-Men for a lot of people, even if he lets his knowledge of a possible future guide his actions into some unfavorable places sometimes. Number 9. Cable. Cable, or Nathan Summers, is the offspring of Scott Summers and Madeline Pryor, which should make you think that this guy isn't from the future at all. You see, Mr. Sinister had planned the birth of Nathan, hoping that he could use Nathan against the mutant known as Apocalypse, but that didn't work out. Instead, Apocalypse infected Nathan with a techno-organic virus. Because of this, and because his parents feared Apocalypse would hunt Nathan down, they sent their child to the future. It is true that adult Cable and Apocalypse do have a lot going on, as Cable does return fully grown to the modern day to stop Apocalypse, but also to face an evil version of himself. It's a lot, but that's time travel. Cable has not just one, but two modes of time travel. He can use a special future gadget to transport himself as well as his allies to a different point in time, but Cable can also use his telepathic abilities to send his astral form back in time as well, although he's only ever done that once. If you think about it, I'm technically talking to you from the past, since this is being filmed like 3 days before it goes up, or maybe it's months since I filmed it, maybe even years. You should like this video or comment and send a message to past me so that me, of your present, aka my future, can see it and appreciate it. Number 8. Spider-Man 2099. Instead of getting bitten by a radioactive super spider, Miguel O'Hara's DNA was biologically mixed with the spider's DNA to save his life after he was forcibly hooked on a not far off future substance by his employer. If that sounds convoluted, well, yeah, it is, but it also sounds right at home in a comic book. Although the process of gaining his powers differed from Peter Parker, Miguel O'Hara was still granted many of the same abilities at a pretty similar level as Spider-Man. One thing that differs largely from Spider-Man is Miguel's spider sense, because he doesn't have one. Instead, Miguel has advanced super senses like Daredevil. Miguel also has some abilities that are just wholly unique to him, like super speed or telepathic communication abilities, which are both really cool. He also has fangs and claws that are not so cool, they're more like freaky, but they're cool for combat, I guess. On top of all those powers though, Miguel is from the year 2099, which means that he naturally has a much more advanced set of technology at his disposal when he finally comes together with the Spider-Verse. Number 7. Booster Gold. Booster used to be a star college football player in the future who was caught betting on his own games and was expelled. So, luckily, this isn't a list of morally upstanding heroes. Booster got a job at a space and superhero museum, and in keeping with his interesting choice of morals, he found and stole Rip Hunter's time sphere, along with a bunch of other superhero gadgets. Using his future son's time sphere, he went back in time with the museum's robot named Skeets. Now, thanks to his knowledge of future crimes that would come to pass, he could easily go and stop them, and he did this becoming a hero, earning himself both profit and fame. Thankfully though, he did actually find some humility and eventually became a real hero, traveling throughout time, fixing the cracks in history and fighting evil time-traveling threats with no praise or applause except for, of course, us readers. Number 6. Iron Lad. Though this character's armor is quite similar to Tony Stark's and shares many of his Iron Man suit's features, hence the Iron Lad name, this is actually the younger version of the one known as Nathaniel Richards, aka King the Conqueror, or aka his other like 30 names. In the year 3016, Nathaniel Richards gets rescued by his future evil self before a lethal attack by bullies. Nathan is given new armor and trained by the villain to make himself even better, if that makes sense. Time travel. But this inadvertently made the young Nathaniel turn then against his future older self, and he uses the armor to travel to the modern day Earth 616. From there, Iron Lad's armor allows him to create temporal divergences which let him manipulate time and travel through it. Now, going back in time, he eventually became the leader of the Young Avengers in order to balance the scales for things that he would do later in life. But because time is complex sometimes, he inevitably goes on to actually eventually still become Kang the Conqueror and do all the horrible things that Kang the Conqueror does. Even knowing your future doesn't stop you from being able to change it, apparently. I guess. Number 5, Bart Allen. Bart Allen was born in the late 30th century, which is around the same time of the Legion of Superheroes. He is the grandson of Barry Allen, which meant that Bart was born with his grandfather's super speed instead of having to receive it in an accident. Unfortunately though, Bart also suffered from a super hyper accelerated metabolism, which means he was aging at an insane rate. Like when he was 2 years old, he looked 12. To stop Bart from developing mental problems, Bart was placed in a virtual reality that kept pace with his aging. Now it turns out that doesn't really solve the problem at all. Instead, his grandmother, Iris Allen, decided to take Bart into the past to find Wally West, the third and arguably most powerful Flash. Now Wally pushed Bart to use his super speed at extreme new levels, which shocked Bart's metabolism back to regular speedster levels. Because of his time in the virtual reality though, Bart had no concept of danger, so he just kept acting before actually thinking. Batman, having the best sense of humor, decided to give Bart the nickname Impulse. Number 4, Rip Hunter. Rip Hunter is actually the future son of Booster Gold, who we talked about earlier, which raises a lot of questions. But he is also the DC Universe's leading authority in time travel. If you'll recall, Booster is from the future and used Rip's own technology to travel back in time in the first place. But this was before Rip was ever actually born in Booster's timeline, and now you understand why time travel is incredibly confusing. Other than being Booster's son from the future, Rip Hunter's origins and true identity are actually a total mystery. But this is on purpose, as keeping his origins and identity a mystery safeguards this time-traveling hero from time-traveling villains that would try to erase him from existence. And that's because Rip Hunter defends the time stream as a time master. Very cool. In his earliest appearances, his portrayal was more in line with the serial type of adventure he was involved in, so more adventure-based stories than a true superhero, until the 1980s when he became much more focused on the future implications of present events, which led to a worldwide apocalyptic event, and it was his obsessive goal to try and stop it. Now more recently though, his origins seem to suggest that he is from the 25th century, and now he's more of a protective overseer. But in all his iterations, he's cool as hell, and how could he not be with a name like Rip Hunter? Super cool. Number 5. Number 5 was one of the 43 children born at once, and one of the 7 children adopted by Sir Reginald Hargreaves in Dark Horse Comics' Umbrella Academy. 5 has the natural born ability to travel through time. While he isn't technically from the future, at the age of 10, 5 traveled 20 years into the future and found himself in an apocalyptic wasteland, forcing him to spend decades trying to travel back to his native 1960s. The failure of this slowly drove him completely insane. When he finally did travel back in time, he was captured and modified by the surgeons of the Temps Aeternalis, who mixed strands of DNA from a bunch of killers with 5's own DNA, which somehow made him the perfect killer, quote unquote. They also helped refine his powers though, teaching him how to perform micro jumps in time, making him incredibly fast. When he rebelled against the Temps and finally returned to the past, 5 days before the apocalypse, 5 regressed back from an old man to an unaging 10-year-old in transit. And that's why he remains the only childlike member of the Umbrella Academy when he is technically a fully grown man in a child's body. Freaky. Number 2, Wave Rider. The original Wave Rider would be Matthew Ryder from the year 2030. Now in this future world, the world has been ruled for 20 years by an armored despot known as Monarch, who has destroyed all of Earth's superheroes. Ryder was rescued from a collapsing building as a child by an unknown superhero, which inspired him to fight back as an adult. Knowing that Monarch had once been a hero before some unknown event turned him to evil, Ryder volunteers as a time travel test subject in hopes of traveling to the past and preventing Monarch from ever coming to exist in the first place. But where other similar experiments failed, his succeeded. Matthew entered the time stream and became Wave Rider, able to move back and forth through time as well as see people's most likely futures by touching them, which is super cool. And finally, in at number 1, it's Kiyoshi Morales. When a group of 5 Captain Americas from different realities are brought together in Captain America Corps number 1 from 2011, we get a look at Kiyoshi Morales, the great-grandnephew of Luke Cage and the 25th century's Commander A, which I'm sure the A stands for America. Kiyoshi is a much more physically imposing character, standing at what looks like almost 7 feet tall, and he was definitely the most physically imposing Captain America among the Captain Americas gathered. Instead of using a vibranium shield, Kiyoshi's suit can generate energy shields on each arm, which resemble the normal Captain America vibranium shield, kind of like Captain America 3099. Now his suit is much more advanced as well, as you'd expect from the 25th century Captain America stand-in. For example, it features a neuroweb, which allows him to tap into wireless systems and stored information. He had all the enhancements we'd expect from a Captain America, and he is just a super cool character who I really hope we get to see more of in the future, but for now, he is definitely my favorite of the members of the Captain America Corps.